the countdown. Prepare for the end of things. Scoop, 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 doop, boop, doop, boop, 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 boop. Excellent connection. Fascinating. Is Market Trades, April 24th, 2025. This is Booksy here. Good morning, Mr. Jason. Howdy. You know, I got a feeling if I spoke like this all the time, I think people wouldn't take me seriously. I think they think I'm not very smart. But truth is, the way you speak doesn't really have much to do with your intelligence, beyond just the ability to get your point across. CISO. CISO. Get you sat out of your butt and get to looking at that stock market there. We don't need no lecture on the I don't know what you call it. The what'd you call that? I don't know. You call that like I have no idea what you would call like people in a certain area. Geo something. Geosocial, I don't know. What you call like the study of intelligence. Most of the places I grew up, people had an accent that was pretty strong, but I didn't really ever have much of one. That's what you get when you grow up military. You end up picking up words in different places. Sometimes you sound a little more redneck. Sometimes you sound a little more Midwesterner. Oh, yeah. And other times, almost like I'm from Jersey or something. It's kind of crazy. Part of me wonders if I should just become like a voice actor. I think I would have enjoyed that. I don't know if I'd love it enough to do it, but I think it would have been fun. That IQ thing. You know them like little bubble tests you take online where you just like poke things and they say how smart you are? You try to figure out if you're smarter than your grandma or than your dog. You know what I'm talking about? You poke the bubble thing, try to get them out of the way. Yeah, them ads pop up. Every time them ads pop up, I do them. And every single time I crush it. I'm telling you, crush it. So CISO is interesting because it's one of the top 25 cybersecurity companies in the world. They just went profitable, and their only debt is notes from friends who have agreed to wait for payments. Okay. Well, cybersecurity is obviously going to be something that is on the rise. This is DJT. I get a lot of people ask me about it because of the recent moves. This is the chart I shared with folks on the Discord. It's a very simple chart. There's three main levels here. Support and resistance, 22, 29, 36, roughly. Those areas. And then you have a bit of an issue with the RSI right now in that it's not breaking out. So it is and it isn't, right? Like it's above its moving average, but you can see that it's actually ready to go. It's kind of approached the line, which is interesting because the price action has not. And to some degree, maybe it has gotten pretty close. If you look at where the RSI is, you can see if you took it down, it's a little bit closer, but it's still not there yet. So I think it's curious. It kind of makes me think there's going to be perhaps a time of pullback here before anything tries to continue. I personally would not trade this, but that's just because I'm not a big fan of anything Trump related. I think it's too volatile. But I totally get why people might want to trade it. And it's not even a political thing. It's just I wouldn't touch it because of that. I think there's just too many things that could go wrong. But if you're interested, this is the chart I had for DJT. And it's been in a kind of squeeze motion. The one thing about DJT that piqued a lot of people's, or I don't know what you want to say, that just caught a lot of people's attention was that the guy he's now investigating naked shorts. But he's saying it in a way that's really goofy. Like he's like, oh, it seems like this problem's been going on for a while. We might be the ones to break it open. And if so, it could change everything. And I'm like, yeah, but I've heard that before. So I don't put a lot of emphasis on it. Like in my brain, I was kind of just like, yep, in naked shorts, it's a thing. Naked short selling. And the guy was previously like a senator or something. So he was like, well, if I were in office still, this should have been something I looked at. And I was like, yeah, probably. But this is kind of the nature of it, right? Is like the SEC has already investigated naked short selling quite a bit, and they've determined that it's not profitable to go track down people who are naked short selling because it's very difficult to prove. One, it's very costly because of the time it takes to prove it. And then in the end, the current system that's in place, there's not really that much at stake. It would be like a fine. And that was like 3 years ago. Maybe something's changed, but they've already addressed this. And I don't really know what this is going to do except just make people get excited about something that probably is not worth getting excited about. Just being honest. There's always the exception. Maybe they will find something and they'll be able to really break it open and change the market. But I think largely this is one of those situations where it's essentially like they didn't care until it affected their chart, and then they were like, oh, okay. So anyways, that's where I'm at with that. So DJT is not one that I'm personally invested in. You guys do whatever you want to do. I think that it's range bound to 36. It could get there, but I think 29 might also present a problem. And then if it broke out of that, yes, it's a big wedge. It could potentially go up farther quite a bit, but it really looks distributive. I mean, being honest as I can be, this big U shape is nasty. This just looks like a lot of volume on the tops to me. So it looks like it's just kind of selling down constantly, being shorted down. And this is a SOW for sure. So I would expect that if it comes down again, it's going to come all the way back to this marker. More than likely would do some kind of like a hook thing. And then who knows? That point, who knows? Because it's back below its low, you kind of have to look at it big picture and say, all right, well, what's really going on? Is it a descending triangle? Is this like some kind of a accumulation long term? Or is it distribution? Because you have a spring here. Those are a lot of bigger questions I'm not really looking to answer right now. But on the whole, I'd say that this is still the range that it's in. I personally wouldn't touch it again, and I wouldn't trade it. And the fact that it ran up recently and it could run up more makes it seem really appealing to people, but I'm not really a fan of it. And I think a lot of people, again, in this particular community gave it a lot of attention because of the guy who's investigated naked short selling again. There's nothing wrong with that by itself. So yeah, I went to, I had to drop my wife off at the airport this morning. So if you guys were like, where did he go? That's where I went. So yeah, I'm getting a little bit confused by people's some people are, not everybody, and this is not picking on anyone in particular, but there's some folks that have been like really concerned, I guess, about AMC because it didn't follow the market, and I'm not at all concerned yet. There's nothing here just yet. The only argument that could be made at this point is that this has a distributive top like a UT and a UTAD, but it's a distributive top in a bigger range. And in the end, this is an auto reaction and a phase B top. So that's it. I do not see anything else on AMC that right now looks particularly bearish. I just don't. If you were looking at this as a range, you would actually say that it looks fine because it's just made higher lows. And frankly, if it continues to do what I think it's going to do in terms of a bullish price action, it's basically primed for takeoff. We talked about this the other day when I did the AMC video. There's a specific set of actions that would probably take place that would signify distribution. Now, right now, this chop could be seen as something bad. And certainly if it drops down below 262, that could present a problem. I think that could be a sign of weakness. But really, until that point, there's not much to say. Even if that happened, it's like, well, who knows? Because in reality, if that's a phase B top, this could be a push up before and a phase B bottom before a spring, which means it could drive down and then just never come back again. There's not any particular sign of weakness yet. The most common thing with an SOW for AMC is that it pushes up and then it goes down again. Like it basically immediately goes down and makes a new low. And that did not happen here. It pushed up, went down, made a higher low, and then came up again. And this is very rounded. The volume is kind of in the middle. Doesn't really present itself as anything particularly negative to me. Yeah, there's a sell-off here. Yeah, there's some LSPYs coming down. But they did their thing, and now they're bouncing out. They came across the creek. And I had people that were saying that, like, yeah, it didn't look good yesterday because it was, red. And I'm like, who cares? I mean, every one of these is like a push-up with a creek retest. There's really nothing wrong with this. This was expected. I expected it to come down lower here because it's probably going to form like a midway cat ear. It's going to look somewhat symmetrical to the other side. And I noted that on every single chart yesterday, pretty much every single chart yesterday was doing the same thing. It was all targeting like an 854 retracement. So if you go back and you look at the bear lines, and I think I deleted them, but there were bearish trends here. And they were triangulating this level down here at 514. It's actually right where I marked it is where we had that big sell-off. And it was near the end of the day. It was like kind of this massive candle towards the end of the day that you had. But it was really right there that those were triangulating. That's an 854 retracement. It's also a retracement back down to the gap. So when I looked at that, and then I went over to Tesla, I was like, okay, well, that's doing the same thing. It had, and I guess I deleted this one as well, but it had lots of markers that were pointing pretty low, of course, and I found a few that were pointing towards this gap. I mean, it's just basic stuff like that. Like, I didn't do anything super fancy, just kind of went and looked at it yesterday, and I was like, well, it would make the most sense if this came back and retested at least 532 to 534, and it did. And then from there, you're going to have to wait and see if it forms like a double top action or a distributive action. And you could look for divergences, so on and so forth. And then maybe, yeah, it may come back down. It may be a very red day. But we also have Google earnings. And part of me thinks that to some degree, like this is already broken. You can see it lost it. It's coming back up. That it could just stop there and then drop into the end of the day and then have a burst tomorrow, or go into a spring action here and then have a burst tomorrow. But my overall vision, if you will, my overall thought for this wave was that it would probably be completing this week and it would be starting on Wednesday, and that's roughly what happened. It came across going into Wednesday and then it broke out. I thought it would be lower, so I did not anticipate there being two pretty large gaps here, but it makes sense to me. Doesn't bother me that there's gaps. These would be like squeeze motions. And then ultimately, if you don't care that much about the gaps right now, it may be because you're going to come back down later to retest lows around 5 to 513, 500 to 513. That totally makes sense to me too. So when I looked at AMC yesterday, yeah, it ended the day red. It was in the red most of the day after that pump, but so what? Like, nothing else here was particularly bad. In fact, it actually pushed and made a higher high, like right here. So I'm not really sure why it doesn't read like a higher high. If you read it, it's on the penny chart. You can see it's the same penny value, but it's clearly higher on the wick. And it did come up and make a new in my opinion, it made a new high there. So like I'm not at all concerned. Like that's a really normal bottom structure, like a reaction and then a drop from the range and then a phase B top perhaps, and then we have a walk down, usually go back for liquidity. So I'm a little lost as to the any kind of sort of looking at this particular area and saying, oh, it's particularly bearish. Now, SPY already did come down and made a lower low here after that bigger move, but SPY also had already advanced the S&P 500, and so did a lot of other stocks. AMC never advanced out of that lower range, it stayed in the same spot. So there's some differences there in the way this sets up versus the way the S&P 500 set up. It's pretty different. So yeah, this is a potential SOW, you know, and it did come below that trend. It also recaptured that trend on Wednesday, and that's part of the reason why it took off. But yeah, this original trend is lost on the S&P. It's not lost on AMC. So I'm a little bit confused as to why, well, this one is, I guess, technically. But I'm a little confused as to what this has presented to some folks that make them feel like it's definitely bearish. And I'm like, I don't see it. So let's look at CISO real quick. So here's what I think about cybersecurity from a fundamental standpoint. Cybersecurity is absolutely one of the biggest and most powerful fields in the world right now. It has been ever since the dawn of the computer, and the internet specifically. But it really is, it's one of the fastest growing fields in the world. But here's what I would suggest to you guys. If you look at cybersecurity, I would look at the fundamentals and like what they're doing as a company. I would look for specifically cybersecurity against quantum computing, because quantum computing is really bizarre. It's kind of its own ballpark. And if you don't know what quantum computing is about, just do your research. So whenever they have like systems in place that provide security for like a regular CPU, it does not work the same with quantum computing. And it's like having two really smart people in the room, but they both have very different ways of approaching problems. And quantum computing does not do the same kinds of things. In fact, for some things, quantum computing is actually worse, which might surprise people. It does not seem to find the right answers sometimes because of the way that it works, which is sort of strange. But for other things, it's absolutely brilliant. Like they just recently had a breakthrough where they developed a truly random number sequence, for example, which you might say, well, I could do that or whatever on a regular computer or whatever. But the idea there is very significant for quantum computing. Anyways, the point is, and you can go research it. I'm not going to talk more about that. But the point is that I would definitely look at quantum computing cybersecurity because if they don't offer that, and quantum computing probably within the next 10 years is going to be a really big thing. If they're not even looking at that right now, just remember it's going to be kind of, you're only really dealing with like half at that point, especially if later on that technology is adopted. So companies that are just future looking, that are looking at that right now, and they're already kind of developing cybersecurity programs that might help integrate with quantum computing and stuff. That's the kind of company that I think is going to have more longevity. But yeah, other than that, just basic fundamental stuff. So anyways, I just want to throw that out there because it's coming and it's going to be here before you know it. And if a cybersecurity firm is not dealing with it, which I'm sure most are, but if they're not, then I wouldn't bother long term. There's a little bit of a wedging action here. I'm looking at the weekly chart, which is probably appropriate because this is a fairly recent IPO. So we're looking at this guy going into a distribution phase. It's pretty typical. It went into a big squeeze right when it started, 31 all the way up to 700, and then it did it again from like 62 up to like 700, and then it just started dropping. Pretty typical for this kind of stuff. honestly, it's always one or the other, right? When there's a brand new kid on the block, they always end up like having some ridiculous squeeze and then selling off, or they just sell off almost like an inverted squeeze. And I think that that's fine, but that's why partly why I don't really like trading them, because I feel like it's a bit of a crapshoot. You just never know. So this to me looks like typical cat ear nonsense right here. And then what I would suggest is that could present, well, I don't know why it keeps doing that. I think I'm clicked the wrong thing here. That could present maybe a later target, but you know, you got to keep it kind of realistic, because a lot of times what this really represents is like a triangulation of values that were being lost. So as much as I would love to say like, oh, it's going to get back there one day up to here, this is really like a representation of that original bull trend. And yeah, it could go there, but for every one of these that does work out, there's probably dozens that do not, because it's trying to like kind of get back to these high levels that it abandoned. So I would be careful with stuff like that. I would think it'd be better in this case to sort of focus on your dominant downtrend, which are these two. And certainly that looks like it's out of the, it does to me look like it's out of the trend. Again, a mild, it's not like the best. Maybe I'm not drawing it the best either. It's kind of a mild, maybe we could just say it's a bit of a wedge. Like I said, it's not really my favorite, you know. You could say that. You could say like here to here, and it looks like a double top and then a double bottom. There's an extra hit there. So there's 3 hits on the bottom, 3 on the top. And then it looks like it's breaking. If it came above that top, which I think it did, then all it has to do is make a higher low, and it should be a pretty good buy. So right now, let's make sure we get this right. I think it's 350, but maybe like 337, 338. That's a weird number. Well, you could just say 350 if you don't like that number. Wait, really? You can? Sure. You know, there's nothing particularly special about rounding until you have to just kind of nitpick like breakouts and stuff. Then you really want to have like a strong number, but like you could say 350. It wouldn't kill you. So I can't quite get 338 for some reason, and my up and down arrows aren't working, which is weird. Usually those work. So yeah, right now this looks fine. It made a higher low. It's a big retracement. It's probably like closer to an 854, maybe even like an 808. That's really deep. So how would you trade this? I think this is pretty simple. I think you just need to wait for the I mean, if you get in now, you get in now. And I'm not looking at anything right now particularly interesting on this weekly. This to me could be a number of things. It's like a possibility this is like what we call the shallow S-curve, which would break back up, hold higher here, and then break out. And it might even do like a little bit of a dip. But in price action, you're not really seeing that. It looks pretty even pace. So it looks like knockdown, huge amount of volume right there on that second candle, which is kind of strange. That's right here. So that was trying to prevent it from going below that support here that was made in September, and it did not ultimately prevent it. So there's a huge amount of volume, a lot of buying then right there, and then it dropped low, came back above, found support on it. Looks like the weekly moving average is right above it at 67 cents. And then we're going to go back to where this found a bottom on the RSI was over here, but I want to see where it hit like a peak right there. So right in here, it tried to hold. So yeah, that one was pretty important. Then looking backwards, right here. That's the level. I'm just using this to help me find the levels, that's all. There's nothing really magical about that. I'm just saying you can see where the bounces were. And it tells you a little bit more about support, and you can see the weakness, and then the up thrust, and then the drop through, and the rejection. So there's two really important places to look, here and then here. So the drop off is always a big helper if you're trying to find a level. Like, look for the drop off and where that last hook is. But then you can often go back and see that it should correlate to some early support and some kind of weakness. So here's the sign of weakness, and then here's the UT or UTAD up thrust. And then it drops through, hooks, and then drops down low. And then when it came back through here, this is where that knockdown volume really picked up on the weekly. That first weekly candle is still huge. I mean, it's still a massive candle. So maybe there was some kind of news or something there. Anyways, this is a really easy trade, though, I think, because if it makes a higher low, and it did, it could be range bound for a while because we don't know. This could just be an auto reaction. But I think one of the good things about this is that in this particular case, it did come above the top, which to me would be a signal that there's the resistance was pushed. Now, you might say, hey, well, what's the difference between that and doing something like this? Because, I mean, technically this came really low and then broke back up. Well, the difference is that the trend broke, right? And back here, the trend didn't break. It just tested it and rejected and went away. Here, the trend broke and went back up. Also, the difference is that in this particular setup, this was range bound and it had the sign of weakness and then broke out. Whereas this is entering a selling climax and then reacting. So it'd be like comparing two different parts of makeup. Like these two are more closely associated, right? And you can see that after this reaction, there's no other immediate drive to like a new low, not yet. So that's what I'm saying. Like if this makes a higher low, it's fine. Like should be fine. And that this is actually like a weakness on the part of sellers in some ways that it went so far. And so what you'd want to look for is a breakout of this trend, and then you could go from there to only after it breaks, then you could use, because you don't know if this is bottomed yet, there could be another bottom, but then after that you could use the middle, and the same thing. I just look for support and then rejection and see if it creates a common sense kind of line, and it does, and it's roughly through the middle. That's what I'm doing right now. So it's roughly through the middle there. So you can see the support, and then you can see on the other side the rejection. And that created a cross trend here, and that's where this cat ear kind of business goes across. So this isn't like a breakout run to the moon kind of position right now. I mean, anything can happen in the market, but really what this is a big reaction's already happened. It's already run up a lot. It came back down. It's trying to find a new support. So this could take a little bit of time. There's a lot of space here going into June even. But sure, if by June this were to kind of come back down, find a support and break out, could it just go right back up? Yeah, I mean, it could. And it could be even higher, but it just depends on how quickly it gets there. And I can't really do much beyond just a simple wave, because there's not really a better way to time this right now. I could look at, like a bigger picture creek and just suggest that, well, if it comes up again, there's a triangulation here. I mean, it could be by May that it comes up to $2. Sure, there's an earnings report on the 28th. So it may be more likely that this is like a pivot low, meaning like this is the bottom of the low, which sometimes happens, and I've talked about that before. So in that case, when we use a sine wave, probably would indicate again that it's like at a real low. So we'll do that and see. Yeah, that seems about right. So this would be like a cross up here, in this regard. So it's like a wave that's trying to follow it, it dips away to back up, and then it kind of races up towards the top. So I would suggest that this is fairly accurate in terms of timing, that this is more likely going to be like a bottoming area, and then it more than likely comes back down into earnings if that's the case. It could be one of these things where it does break out early and then still drifts down into earnings. And if it's bullish, then I think you have a breakout opportunity. But then you see what this does is it kind of takes the, not the wind out of the sails, but it does kind of take a little bit of the luster out of it, because it looks like it could have another lower hit here. Like that's what that looks like, is the wave is actually targeting like there. So I would suggest that it probably doesn't go beyond $140 when it comes back up. And then if it's bullish, you might see it kind of back up here. I don't even know. The timing on this is kind of wonky because it looks like the highs would be somewhere around September, but that makes sense. We've seen a lot of that lately where September, October is a big downturn into January. So you might have like a backup and then a rally, and then again, kind of coming back into February, into the new year, maybe have another rally or something. But, you know, all of that's very speculative. It's purely based on the waves that they're set up right now. So I just don't think that this is a huge, we'll just do this because I think it's more likely it's not going to go like straight up like that, but we'll move it over. Something more like along these lines. Yes, it's basically the same thing, I can tell. But that's just how it measures. And if it's not able to cross up there, then you could still have like a high period here in October and then sell back down. And this is also possible if the operators want to sort of keep it below $1, for example. You could distribute here around $1 and then head back towards a low. And long term, it's hard to say what that would be because, again, this is sort of just one part of it. And frankly, this could be as big as or as small as anyone, you know, could imagine. But you could definitely see something like that too. And that could be an auto reaction in a phase B top on a really long setup. So it's not really wise to assume that this goes to the moon right this second. But yes, it's in a position where if maybe on like the 4 hour and the daily, if this is overbought or oversold, and it's not really, it's actually looking overbought. I would suggest, again, it's going to come up and kind of, it's about to top off, and then it might come back down. So I would see it as a better buy if one of two things happens. If it comes back down to the floor again, maybe around earnings, and let's use this this little like flattening area right here. This is a preliminary support right there. I think that's where it would go back to. So more than likely. So if it goes below like 37 cents again, then it'd be really good to watch it. And then if it broke out above this creek, then you could say, yeah, it's going. But I think anything else right here looks kind of like diminishing returns. It doesn't really look worth investing in. You've only got like a little bit more to go. Maybe 10, 15%. And then it would probably be at a top. So I wouldn't assume it's going to break out here. And frankly, we really can't assume anything anyways. I mean, this could easily be a correction, like an ABC kind of correction. But if it forms like a wave 5, you could end up coming down below the bottom, you know, and we don't know that. We need to see it hold that support. So that's what I'm saying. Like this area right here is clearly acted as a support a few times, but it's dipped beneath it. I'd like to see it try to go beneath it and not be very successful. That would be good. So it kind of shows you like the dip beneath it. It's holding, dips beneath it a little bit. It'd be great if it came back down and just didn't break it or barely broke it and then broke out. That would be very strong. Then that would be like, yeah, that looks good. So the wave analysis doesn't give you like the perfect answer, but it gives you like an estimation, and then you can kind of see like, all right, in the future, if this is able to kind of break this zone right here, and it makes sense based on where that is. That's clearly a resistance. If it's able to break that at some point in the future, then I think you could see like $3 or $4 again. But is this a buy right now just because? No, I mean the 4 hour already looks pretty cooked. So I think it's going to do a pullback, and then you'd have to see. And it might be that simple, like just like last time, like pull back here. And we have seen this kind of formation on a bottom, and I can't remember if we found out what it was called. The W is one that people use, but I've seen it before. It's like a TP bottom or something. I know that's not politically correct or whatever, but I have seen this head and shoulder on bottoms before. Like it looks like it's going to distribute, and it's possible it could, but it's like one of those ones that you see sometimes, and it ends up being like a throwback into like a double bottom, which I always think is interesting because it looks bearish, but it's on a bottom, and it's almost like inverted. Your expectations are usually that a head and shoulders on a top. So it's curious. So I would not be surprised if that's kind of the goal here, is to get back to this zone. I just don't think that's really worth investing in. Yeah, and then if you look at the 4 hour RSI, you can see the creek jumps happened. So like as soon as this gets overbought, that was from the weekly, as soon as this gets overbought and you start topping off, if it doesn't break out, it's just going to come back down and retest that trend, if you will. And it could be quite bad. If you look at the moving average instead, you could imagine it coming down pretty far over time. Certainly into earnings, it seems to be timed out that way. So this is pretty much what we're seeing across the market, like there could be a May run, but there's certainly possibility of coming down first into mid-May, and that seems to be universally true right now. So yeah, this one not for me, not yet. I wouldn't even give it a second look until it makes a bigger move here or there. That's kind of crazy. It never even went back down to the bottom, which I thought it might, but it ended up holding up really strong and going up, which is similar to what I thought might happen here, where we just kind of keep the strength. But it still went below the idea of this one was that it was going to come back up and basically recreate this top trend on IWM, and it never did. I haven't really looked at IWM very much. I'm kind of sick and tired of it, but it's worth looking at. Same deal. Look at where that top is. It's coming up right here, going into kind of end of April right now. It never went up here. It didn't make that push. So we thought that if it did an early dip, that you could get a spring motion. This clearly was more or less what happened right here. But then it doesn't even break out. It just kind of stayed really, really, really low, as you can see. And so it pushed the resistance. It did. Barely, like right there, and it retreats, breaks out, and goes. What's weird about this is that the like it already kind of lost that upward trajectory, and I thought it was strange because this has like a near double bottom, and a lot of those creeks were really, really low, like they're super steep, which is also kind of weird. But now it seems like it's defaulting to this guy, which is fine. I mean, that's kind of better for everybody anyways. This is some old diagram. I think I was looking for something like this. Up thrust, up thrust. We were talking about the squeeze motion. I said it might be like a series of down times where you have nothing really going on, and then all of a sudden it just pops. That's pretty normal in this kind of moment. So it is kind of looking like that. RSI already did that move really early. I think we talked about that because I thought it would come up and then drop later, and ended up dropping like right away. So it went down first instead of staying up longer. And again, that's the limits of some of the wave analysis you do, is like you might see one wave and think that's the right length, and it's not. So still looking kind of bullish on the hourly. There's some space to go up, but we're certainly approaching like a top. You can see it's riding that cross on the wave, which makes sense. Just momentum, S-curve. It really looks like it's about to be done. And it makes sense when you look at this on just the price action, because the only thing that I would suggest to you that's a little bit like, like I wonder, is the widening that happened here, because it does look like it broke out from that widening. And I'm pretty sure that I did that because there was yeah, it did. It's right there. So I did that because on the RSI, it was more obvious on some time frames. I couldn't really tell what was going on here, why it looks like it was so off, but I'll fix it. Looks like I drew it really off, more like that. It's not a very strong one. So there's no better way to say this, but it's kind of a subjective thing when it comes to Bulkowski analysis, in that he always says in his analysis that if it's a loose pattern, it's not as reliable. But there is no, like, he doesn't give like a metric for it, which makes me kind of like wonder if he's just kind of acknowledging that, well, when the structures are really tight, the numbers tend to work out very well, but then when they're not, they just miss more often. And I don't blame him for not having a statistic. The guy does statistics like crazy, but it's like, how do you know what a loose pattern is? It have definite hits or no definite hits, but that's about all you can do. So this to me is clearly a widening. So this would be a breakout of that widening. And if that's the case, this should have a target that goes back up to the top, which is around, I got too many markers on here, which is up here around 208. So it's not like super, super high, but potentially comes back up to near 208. But here's the other thing, right? Is that if you zoom out a little bit more, I don't know if you can see this, there's another one, because my charts are really messy right now. There's actually another one. This is off. This should be like higher up right there. There's another kind of funnel down that's much larger, and you can see the top of that is right here. And that is more closely associated with like a master, gigantic, kind of big picture macro retest. Because if you look back at the big picture, this goes way back, this trend that we lost. It goes back down to, I think, the COVID bottom, and then the bottom in 2023. I think that's where that came from. Yeah, and it is anchored to it. So this kind of bigger white line going up right here is super important. And I said I thought it was going to be a bigger picture SOW, meaning it's a weakness right there. But if you notice, like, that's where that check is going to be. So it certainly makes it seem like if you're going to have a downturn in the near future, it'd probably be right above. This is, again, a widening here on the blue. You can see the blue level. It's like widening out. You can see the white widening is done, and it's definitely there. I mean, there's a huge amount of volume on the bottom. So, again, the target for this white widening should be near the top, maybe around 207. This larger blue widening is also very clearly there, but it hasn't broken out. And so it's kind of a question mark, right? Of like, okay, well, where's that going to happen? I'm not sure yet, because we'd have to see what happens when it gets to that level. This was a previous bottom, and it's also now interacting with, as you can tell, it's also interacting with a macro trend line that we lost. So I guess my imagination would suggest that if this is going to be somewhat bullish, there'd be some kind of like a squeeze motion. I honestly think it may be Friday into Monday, because I keep seeing that on the rest of the charts, but I can't base everything on Google. Google's having their earnings, I think, tonight. But I feel like that's been coming up a lot as a possibility. It just seems like a little bit much to me, but like we've already had this kind of bigger push up. Maybe we're going to come back down already. It's not impossible. I can't say in this particular case. I'd have to look at each stock individually. But if it came back down to gap fill, obviously it's not broken out anymore. And if it came back down to gap fill at this point, it's going to be a break of this trend. So it really just is going to be a determining factor the next couple of days, see what happens here. Maybe it doesn't even go all the way. That's another thing. There's a second gap, which is at 187. So this could see a turn down going into Friday into Monday and have like a Tuesday run up. That's still pretty bullish. But you can see what I mean. Like either way, this is going to present an issue right around 198 going up to 200. It's hard for me to imagine that not getting some kind of a reaction to the downside. And then if it can hold support, I think it then goes up to probably that first level. So there'd be two main hits here. I'm trying to see where that other line's coming from. Hold on. It might get some like sort of stutter. It would work really well if it came up by the 29th, because it would already be in like that pocket. But if it doesn't, it could stop a little short. So it'd come up to this pocket around 206. And then that breakout on the lower one would be finished, but the breakout on the higher one potentially comes up to 218. But I could certainly see why from here until like May whatever, 15th or May 28th or something like that, one of those days, this could easily have a weakness already and then kind of come back up by the end of May. And then that's it. I mean, I don't think that the market needs to go any further. I talked about this on the S&P 500 too. Like we're probably going to come back into that lower area that was tested, but it would be strange to see it come all the way up. So I'm thinking like by May to June, the whole market kind of rallies here back up, and it looks kind of bullish, but in the end, this is not a bullish kind of move. It's not necessarily a real market move, because you've already broken through the trend. So at this point, you probably hold that trend right there, that bigger one. So it's pretty similar. Yeah, and this is in the right spot. It may not go that high though. But it'd probably hold that until that point, and then you're really at risk at that point of kind of crapping out and coming back down. There's a lot that could happen after that. So, but this is actually fairly common sense if it can make it over these levels early on. I think this would break and then break again. The two targets being again 204 and then later 218. And then maybe you get an extension as high as, oh, there was another trend right here that was never tested. That's where you could get that extension, perhaps. But that's also like a really fast-paced bullish outlook. There's certainly a longer-winded version of this where this comes down, especially like now, if something were to happen, this could come down. And I know you guys are like, well, what about, the tariff thing? Well, here's the deal, right? The tariff thing, as you guys know, doesn't actually end until July 11th. So if you're going to have a rally, it really is the best time to do it if you think that a lot of these tariffs are going to stay in place. I mean, I get the idea of selling because of the fear, but if you're just trying to take the market back up because you know it's going to sell down again, this would really be the best time to do the back tests. There's not going to be a better time, because later when you get to that time and everybody decides to sell off again, you'd want to already have those checks done, ideally. And frankly, like on the big picture, it really does look very low here. Like this is a huge reaction down, and we really have no reaction back up yet. So sure, like it could take a weird route and just sort of stay low and go sideways for several months. And I'm sure a lot of people out there feel like that's more likely. Like, oh, I think it's just going to chop and come down into that day. And then, I don't know. If it's good news, it'll run. If it's bad news, it dumps further. Yeah, that's fine. I'm looking at this saying, well, it hasn't checked this. It hasn't checked this. There's no back test here. There's gaps all the way back up. I just think that now would be an ideal time to go ahead and have like a squeeze type rally. And then if you're going to be bearish, then you short it back down. And I think we talked about this as like a macro cat ear. Well, as a carrier, couldn't it have like a double bottom like this and then still go up? And yeah, but I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I don't really feel like it's that obscure. If you think it's going to go up, sure, go get some longer option calls or buy some shares. If you're not sure about it, don't trade it like that. It's that simple. There's a lot of stuff going on right now in the world, so I would be suggesting that if it can get up here to 198, that's a good place to kind of see where it goes from. And then that would be a good time to maybe think about investing, especially if it broke out again. You get a decent $10 run, and then you can kind of watch the creeks. Because at that point, you're out of the bigger wedge, and that, to me, would signal that it's probably going to go up to 218, or the market wants to try to go back up to that floor. And right now we're like right above below. We're really not far at all. We're $6 off. So anyways, that's IWM. And small caps have always been a little bit wishy-washy. So yeah, I think there's a lot of question marks that I have about it, but the wolf play. So wolf, as in wolf speed, is an interesting one because it has, let's just say it has a really high ceiling for profitability. It's a semiconductor type deal. They had this contract that they thought was going to be good because of the CHIPS Act. It didn't end up being good. Weirdly, though, because again, Trump is like, hey, we're not going to necessarily honor these things. He wants to get rid of it. So I don't know if there's news about that recently. Maybe they're going to get portion of it. They had committed to building a factory that was going to hire in like Charlotte, North Carolina, that was going to have like 800 people. And they were still committed to building that factory, even if the Trump administration undid the CHIPS Act and they didn't get that money. This is a very interesting company with an interesting history. They basically had a product that they used for years. It's a pretty huge, I say this like very generously, it's a pretty huge opportunity because if they're successful in this, it's going to do like what the GameStop did, which is like a long-term, potentially, it's going to have a really long-term squeeze. This thing used to be up at like $129 a share. So if we go back and we look at this, and we look at it in terms of like a cat ear breakdown where those supports were, this one's probably not the best one. I'd probably use maybe even this. This is even better. I'd probably just use the top. If it doesn't really respect it up, then you kind of flatten it out. This is very high. So what happened in the GameStop squeeze is that it returned back to this trend. Now, does that look reasonable to go to $330 right now? No, it doesn't. But over time, sure, maybe. It just depends. They basically, like I said, they completely changed direction. Even if you were kind of bearish on this, which would be reasonable, you'd probably expect that it's going to eventually come back up and retest this level, which at this point is around $36. So there's a very, very high overhead for this. And you can see that the long-term chart actually looks quite nice. And I'll get rid of some of this extra junk on here so you can see it. You can see that the long-term chart actually looks quite nice. Like there's this really long-term kind of bear flag. There's a huge amount of, you can see with volume and the MACD rather, that there's a consolidation, like a wedging action going on. It's a bit of a flattening, hasn't quite broken out, but it's trying to. And at this point, it's just peaked above the top. So it's been one sell-off after the next, after the next, after the next. And it certainly feels like it's overdue for like some good news upside. It also has a massive amount of volume going in here. But you have to understand, like a lot of that is because of the news as it related to this company. And it's not every company has like a Cinderella story where they get to recover. I mean, sometimes it's a killer, like we don't know the future. So Wolfspeed may have this amazing recovery and be this amazing play with this huge V-shaped recovery that makes millionaires, but it's also just as possible that it goes belly up at this point. Like I said, they had a major shift in their industry. They decided to do chip manufacturing, and they were not doing that exclusively before, which is why this chart looks like, oh, for 20 some odd, 30 years or whatever, it was up, and then all of a sudden, within no time, it's gone. Well, there you have it. I would argue that this is in a kind of a distribution model anyways, but clearly, like, the change in direction did not help them in that regard. It kind of reset the whole chart. It brought it back down to very low lows that it hasn't been at since 1997, 1998. So, I mean, I look at these things, I'm not particularly worried because I think that on the big picture, it's bound to have some kind of a recovery. But I do think that there's a over expectation sometimes that people may have that, like, just because it's down means it's going to have this massive squeeze. That's not necessarily the case. We don't know that. So I'm thinking that Wolfspeed is an innovator in wide bandgap semiconductors focused on silicon carbide, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Yes, but again, look at their company history. They didn't focus on that at all, and then they really shifted to focusing on that. So they have a lot to prove. They just do. It's one of those things where it's like there's no proof of concept, right? It's like they suddenly decided, hey, we're going to do this instead of what we've been doing, and that's a big deal for a company to just sort of pivot. It can be a lifesaver for some companies, right? Because it's like, oh, well, they were going down a path that maybe wasn't sustainable or that wasn't going to profit them, and now they've shifted, and now they're really reinventing themselves. Sure. But again, proof of concept, there's not really any way to sit here and say, like, well, that's definitely the way it's going to go down. We just don't know. Yeah, on the big picture, I think there's two main spots that I'd look at for the shorter term. One was kind of just given to us because when it dropped down in March, it creates another one, and that is right around $6, which is about double where it is now. The next one was the target we had anyways, which was at 12, which is still a huge trade, right? That's 4 times the amount right now. So that's still a huge trade. And that, again, when we look at these things, I can't really do much for timing except just kind of give you the bare bones. So this is a 58-degree drop, roughly, and it could be a little bit steeper even, but I'm going to use like a 58-degree. So I think that's fine. It's kind of a conservative value there. I think if we went right to the lowest point, it'd probably add a little bit to that, but I'm not particularly worried about it. So I'm just going to look at roughly that 58 degrees, and I can't do it because this thing's in the way. All right. So if it had a V-shaped recovery, and that's a big if, you're talking about like October potentially being back up around 14. I've been buying shares, and they've been doing very well. I've been buying shares off the bottom here, but I'm also not 100% convinced that this bottom is in. I think I mentioned before, like, this is not unrealistically going to potentially go to $1 if it can't find a serious bottom here, because there was a lot of indication of this possibly going down that low. And I had done some measurements just to sort of check it, and it's certainly not out of the question. So just be aware that it's a higher risk trade. I'm not saying, and I hate that because I'll do that and then people will say, it's not going to do that. It's never going to do that. And I'm like, well, we don't know, And people said the same thing about AMC. When you say, oh, it's probably going to come back down to that $2, $3 area because they left it. Why would they leave it and then create a sign of weakness, like as if they want to go there? How it gets there was debated for a while by me, obviously. But, a lot of times we don't want to think that it can happen, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen. And I feel like in this case, there were some things that indicated it could have another drop. So I'd be cautious about it. I'm not really worried right this second. I'm just saying, like, Could this be it? Could this be the bottom? Yes. A 50% retrace is perfectly at like 624, which was that level that it was sitting at. So it's a really solid retrace level if it goes back there, which is like right in the middle of this cat ear. Support, breakdown, right? This is support right here at 6. This is breakdown right here around 630. That's the ideal area. And that's where that would come back to if it can make the break. There's a lot of little tiny creeks to get there. So again, like the way in which it moves, I had kind of imagined it could squeeze up here and then drop back and push again. There's some long-term trends there, maybe into May. But then after that point, who knows? If that's an auto reaction and they want to come back down, then it's pretty easy to do that. I mean, you could easily have it kind of chop down and, you know, we can end up right back to where we are now, if not lower, into like a spring, into, you know, the next year or something like that. So there's just no way to know whether that happens or not. So just be aware that if you're in Wolf, I think it's a long haul kind of play. And I'd be probably watching news on, I'd be watching the news on this one about where it may or may not be at different times. I hate to do this kind of like typical AMC bananas stuff where it's like always the same. But yeah, I mean, I could see this being a build out into January down low. This is totally reasonable to me. And it probably presents itself as a bit of a widening at that point, which would make it a little more appealing to some people. Yeah, so I'm thinking $5 to $6 is likely, but probably not beyond that. Because the way this had to break out at this top, it just didn't. And really, we didn't miss it at all. We just kind of watched it, and it was a crappy thing to have to trade because I was like waiting to the last minute. And unfortunately, it's like you can see it. There's just one really bad week. But it just doesn't jump over. It's the typical like wave cross that didn't happen. It had 1, 2 in the end, and that 1, 2 had a weakness, and then it just crapped out. So now we're just in sort of wait and see mode. And I would not be surprised, again, if it has sort of a rally, maybe going into June, maybe a secondary rally in July or August, and then kind of crap out. Really trade down here. I mean, once you're down here, the question is like, why not trade it? Most of the time, if you make this kind of a dip and you find a lot of buyers, you will come back to trade it. So, yeah, to me, it seems a little like a no-brainer. It's a good trade if you want to trade it up to 6, but I don't know if I'd go farther than that right now. Because even like best case scenario here, it would take till October. And that's like best case scenario. So that could just be like the low too, like a pivot down, which is always kind of frustrating, but that's a while. Yeah, I'm thinking it could be back up to like 24 by next year. You know, it's weird because we were talking about this stuff before. I felt like really discouraged because of how crappy the market was getting. And I was like, man, there's just no reason or logic to some of these moves. They don't make any sense. But then, you know, in the back of your head, this is probably going to be another lifeline opportunity for some people. Like, there's going to be people who enter the market this year in kind of a write-off year, or maybe in the next 2 or 3 years, even if we have a really crappy bear market for a few years. But there's going to be people who, over this time, enter the market and end up doing very well if they're in the right stocks and the right time. And they're going to end up doing very, very well because these market turndowns don't happen that often. The bear market corrections, or not a correction if it's a bear market, but it's a bear market. It doesn't happen that often. It's more often that there's like a correction. It's a lot less often that there's a bear market. So if there's a bear market for a given time, then I think a lot of people are going to do quite well. And certainly the truth is also there for the downside. Some people really do well trading with volatility. Yesterday I traded down the S&P 500 and made money, and Tesla. When it hit the top here, I bought a put and traded it down towards 534. Made money on it. Pretty easy trade. Right? Needed to go back to that level and retest it. Didn't even quite come as low as I thought it might. You can see. But it still came down. So I made money on it. Some people really thrive on that. I've got to be honest, I haven't really enjoyed trading upside because in this kind of bearish market environment, it's been challenging. The short-term options trades have been okay. But anything kind of middle, I don't know, a week or two out, it's like a mixed bag. Some of them did very well, some did not. And mostly I think this has been cooled off, like volatility's cooled off quite a bit. So we're doing a little bit better now on the bull side. Speaking of bull side, this is going to go. I mean, that looks a little more like a head and shoulders to me. And I thought this might come back down earlier. So let's see where that creek is now. I don't think I drew it on this time frame. This is a 15-minute. Looks like I drew it on a higher one. Yeah, it might come right back down. It kind of built a support on it. I think it's going to depend on whether this can breach 547. There is a pretty massive creek there. This big yellow one was more a speculative motion on my part. There are some connections to it early on back here that it might get all the way up there, and that this was an attempt to break towards it. So I had used this as a motif, and I guess I was proved right to do so because the motif had suggested that this orange path happened, that we come down to basically 510, just like we did here, and we create a bit of a spring, and then we push up towards the intersection of those markers. The one problem that I've had with this is kind of identifying where those markers really are. Now you might say, well, it's because your charts are garbage. Well, part of it is, yeah, there's a mess here, but part of it's like I didn't know where this middle was. And when we were going into that Thursday, that was the Good Friday day off, I didn't know if it was going to push up again. And so I did not draw this orange line until Monday, really, and the end of the day, Thursday. Had this pushed up higher back here on Thursday, I would have had to have said it's going to go. So if it had gone to 535, which it looked like it might be a little S-curve here. Had it gone to 535, I still would have been bearish, but at least going into the next week, because there was a lot indicating that it was going to come down again. But I would have drawn this particular line higher, but I didn't have that. So I knew it needed to be there. That triangulation is basically the same as this triangulation right here. So this generates like a secondary move, and then it does like this kind of ranged out motion right in the middle, and then it breaks back out. There's different ways of looking at this, and I've tried to figure out if there's like a perfect way to sort of look at it. One would be just sort of look at top and bottom and make an estimation. That doesn't quite work super well. This could be thought of as like an S-curve, but again, you kind of have to know where the middle is and know where the bottom to measure from, because there's two different bottoms here. So there's like a lot of questions. One of the things that did stand out to me was that the hook from the bottom through that push-up did seem to create a really nice intersection for the top. And then if you look back at where that intersects, it intersects this drop zone. So when I was looking at this area, I thought, well, maybe it's going to go all the way up to 564, which, you know, at the time you're like way down here. You're like, I don't know how it gets to 564. But frankly, like I had bought 564s and I already exited them, but I had bought them and they were really cheap back down here because it doesn't look like it's going to go there. But I was like, well, it should be going there if it builds out. It built out the same way, jumped the creek here, gapped up and everything the same, which it did right here back in March. So my thought is that this is building out towards the more outer creek. However, the outer creek, it can't get there without breaking this widening. So it's kind of the same question mark that I have on IWM, which is like, are we just going to break this widening? Are we going to just kind of bonk our heads back up and then break it? It looked like for IWM that might happen where you bonk your head and then break it. So there was 2 marks right above us, and one was really close. I mean, technically could be on one right now, but one was right at like 198, and that looked like maybe going into Monday, Tuesday, you could hit 198, and then you could really have a pretty steep backup period going into May, and then maybe break out in early May. And that's a possibility here. So like I don't have that one quite on the chart, but it'd be like this, where it just goes like sideways a little longer and really consolidates on this top. In some ways that makes sense here on IWM, because if you look at the levels that are tested, they actually dropped low here, but they didn't come back and test that top at 198.90 or what is that number? 190.90? Is that what it was? It's like 192. So 192 wasn't actually tested, and that was the previous top. You see how it just like passed through it? So it would make a lot of sense if this pushes up one more time, maybe pushes that resistance a little bit, so it comes back into that gap, but it doesn't quite get to 202, and then it drags the price back down to like 192. And then the breakout itself is a little bit later. That to me would work. It would also start looking a lot like a rising wedge, which could be really dangerous. But I suppose going into Monday, that's a possibility, that it sort of tops off there. And I don't know, man. Wedges are weird because you can have like a reversal on it. So, yeah, it kind of looks like Friday, guys. I think there might be a Friday burst. That's what I thought on SPY. Not just because of Google. It just kept showing up that Friday might be a big green day, and then kind of end the day on a dip, and then Monday might actually be red. Tuesday, Wednesday to Thursday. Next week might be a throwaway week is what I said, meaning you kind of end up back where you started. So Friday you end up around 197 or something, then the next week you could end up really in the same spot without breaking out. Like nothing could happen. And it would totally make sense here to sort of have a sideways action and get that retest. And then the following Monday, which is the 5th, which is a little too on the nose for me with the AMC stuff, but could have that push up. Now, if that wedge were to break, well, that's a whole nother question mark. You've got 1, 2, 3. We got 1, 2. That would be potentially 3 right here, depending on how low it goes and how long it takes to get there. Could be 3 right here. That's usually enough. So this, I think shorts are going to come in real heavy around 198. I actually think that might be a better play than to play long right now. I mean, short term, you could play that, but I think for the next week or the next 3 or 4 days after that, it's probably going to be really, 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 really pushed down. In fact, I would bank on 197 to 198 being a heavily shorted zone on IWM. It might be a good play if you like to do that, but it looks very likely. And I think you've got to come back and buy back in here in order to see any advancement. And this is where we may see an SOW if it's not going to advance. You could see a weakness here where it like dips below, and then it looks like it's going to come back in. And technically, could you dip below and then break out? Yeah, but this bottom is at like 189. I don't think it could come back there. I guess it could if it does it fast enough into like Wednesday. There's so many different ways to do this, but this would be fine as well. So once it gets to next week, I think we're going to have like a throwaway week, so to speak, where there's just really not much to talk about. This would give you the gap fill, and then it would also give you the chance to come back and retest that top. And if that's successful, now you're at a really tight wedge. Man, I don't know. Maybe this is just like a really fast pump, dump, pump kind of thing. Hit the first target, make an SOW, hit the second target, and then be done. I don't know. I'm kind of making it look really mild on the first one. We'll have to wait for that because I don't know yet. So it would not surprise me if we weren't really moving until May 5th into the 14th. And before that happens, could this have a dip down? Yeah. In an M structure here, it actually makes some sense because you would have like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then another one. This could happen. It doesn't really make a huge difference in the structure as long as you have like a 1, 2, and then 3 again. So certainly like this build out would make sense. And it may need to do that to come back and check liquidity here on this jump that was made. So come all the way back down to 186. I don't know if that's enough. Let's take a look. Let me see if that is at least a 3.8 retracement. I think it is. It's 236 off there. 3.8 would be way back to, ooh, it's like right on that gap. Honestly, we'd probably just go through the 3.8 and then hit the creek and then recapture 3.8, something like that. That's a possibility, and then come back up to really break out after the 14th. I know it seems a little redundant, but the idea is you're like backing up to check those trends. So this is actually a double test here because there's one that's a curved out that did make a support that was higher here, which kind of solidifies the curve. There's another one that's just sort of a straight shot line. You can see it when you look at this jump right here. So anyways, so this actually looks pretty convincing to me that it may be a wedge that breaks down in May and then goes on the 12th. Certainly a possibility. Yeah, I think I'd have to say either way. There's got to be something here that gives, because if you went straight up, even if you went up right away and hit that marker at 208, that's a break to the upside on a wedge. I think what probably happens is that it reverses in kind and comes back down by like the 15th. It seems pretty likely. This would be like the middle, and then this would be the top. It's just a shorter M. We could do a measurement. Last time I did this on IWM, it actually worked really well. So it tends to be fairly consistent. So I went to the bottom to where it jumps the creeks. So that was measured as 1. And then the second one, which was like the middle, yeah, actually it does measure out to being May 5th. So the middle is an M. It's, if you think about it in the sine wave, it makes sense because you'd have like an up, but then the down period would be, so the up down in the beginning is just 1, but this is also like a sequence of time. It's easy to kind of look at this and say, well, I think this goes to here, and then there's a simple way of measuring it, like up, down. But that's not what I'm doing when I'm doing what I'm doing right now. So you might be looking at it thinking, why don't you just double the value? I'm not doing that because I'm not measuring the necessarily like in that particular way where I'm thinking that the entirety of this, because what happened is what happened is that this is the way it looks. And what that tells me is that you could have an equal part bottom. So if that's the way that looks, then it's very easy to imagine that it doesn't really go straight back up here because you haven't spent the same amount of time. If you're like kind of rushing into the bottom, then you would have to build this out. And that is actually a more equal parts wave. And so the wave itself is it's not split in half because of the way I'm measuring it. Does that make sense? So then you're actually splitting it into 3 parts because there's a prolonged bottom and a prolonged top. But what's weird about when you see stuff like this is that this is happening inside of like a wedge. And I do think this is it. This is the first M because it's the reactive one that made a higher high. And this could be thought of as it, but it ultimately like pulls back again. This is, in my opinion, the first. And so I'm really looking at it in those terms. And what I'm thinking is that we're getting like an acceleration. So this motion is happening. But then there's like this kind of build out into the top before the top happens. It's like that. So there's an acceleration here. So it does look like it goes straight back up, but it's really like a build out. So the bottom might look, we'll call this the bottom, right? The lower M. It might look like really fast in some parts. That's what I was saying, like that motion of like pump and then retrace and then like pump and then like retrace and then like pump is very commonly associated in my mind with that middle because it doesn't always look like a nice clean walk up. And then the other thing is that when you look at this, usually this M can give you some indication of where it's going to be later, but this one's a little tricky because I don't want to say it's subjective. It's not subjective, but like this, usually the cat ear gives you some sense of, so there'd be like a hook right here. And that would give you some sense of like where that top may be. Because again, it's creating a support and resistance. So where is that, Booksy? Well, it's super high here. And I don't think that's the right one. I never redid it on IWM, but it should be probably where this dropped down. There's not that many spots it could be. So sometimes I'll need to use I'm not seeing anything. Like maybe that one, which actually makes sense because it's already like right there going into Friday. So it's kind of going beyond it. So it may be one of these things where it pumps up and then comes back through it and like hooks on it. And that ended up giving you like the triangulation. That looks right to me actually. In this case, because this is another thing that's just experiential. It's not really like a hard and fast rule, but it does seem very often that on some of these guys, they come up early and this ends up being like a breakdown. And so this is actually, it hits the trend a little earlier than expected. It's in between top and a bottom on a trend. So this would not be out of the question here. Sort of a pump and then like an attempt to kind of come back up into Monday and then dump Monday. Just kind of keep everything high. And it would look like it's going to go because it would be like, oh, it's doing another one of these. But what makes it bearish is that it would have already broken out of this guy. Ooh, insidious. It's right there. It's right there. So, yeah, it would be right in the ideal spot. So it's looking like Friday, maybe a green day, and then it goes up to hit the top here around 199. And then I think it's going to end up kind of staying around 198. It'll have like a little sell off and then it'll recover at the end of the day. But if it ends up at like 198, y'all, I'm bearish on it Monday. I think Monday is in a dump day, Monday into Tuesday. I do. Seemed very likely. So this setup is starting to look really concrete. And before it did not look concrete. It looked very, very difficult to read. And I was not really excited about it because I was like, I don't really see where it's going. Now I'm seeing it a lot better. I'm getting a little bit excited about it because I'm like, oh, okay, we can trade this. I can trade this. I know where to expect the turn down and I know what to look for because that turn down would be a turn down would be right here if it happens. And it's really right where it should be because it would probably come back up. I mean, I might be a little bit off with how high it goes. I'm sure I could be like $1 off even and it'd still be fine. But that's clearly where that top is and it's clearly what's being triangulated here from the bottom through this drop down. And that's the only good marker that I have. There's none of the other ones here really make sense. So yeah. So then what that tells me is that up into Friday, down into Monday seems pretty likely. And I would doubt that IWM would do it by itself. So let's take a look at SPY because it's in a similar spot. Yeah, it's got that ceiling right above it. It really looks the same to me. Yeah, but you thought it was going to go up here. Well, remember, I was looking at this triangulation like it was back here, and it does come all the way up to the top at 563. But the issue right now is that there's actually a much larger wedge, which I didn't have at the time. I drew it later. And it didn't actually go to a larger wedge. It didn't go to like a new wedge. It had already existed. I thought originally that this was widening every time. So when I did it the first time, I don't know why, but I had just drawn it from the peak. And from the peak, it just looks like it's pushing out. And it does respect those marks, but I just thought, oh, it's pushing out. It's going to push out again. So I'm like looking at it like, yeah, it's totally possible that 563 and 575 hit. It wouldn't have killed you. I mean, if you had gotten those calls and contracts down here when I was talking about it, you'd still be really green right now. But just to think it's going to get there right now just because that's there, I don't think that's necessarily the truth because there's another widening. So it certainly looks like, I wouldn't say it was 100% wrong. That would be a bit unfair to me, but I would say that it looks like it's going to stop short of that. And I had another level here around the top. So here's what I'm thinking this is. I think this might represent like an SOS with a backup. If this has a push up to the top here, it's going to be above the range where this blue line is at 547. But then there's got to be some kind of a, can't be that simple, but I guess it might be. Maybe it will push because that's really high. Well, let's use the same marker we used on IWM because the market seems to be kind of complacent right now. So I'm going to use this hook value instead, meaning it's kind of looking all the same. It's not complacent. You know what I mean? So I think... yeah, and yesterday I was like, oh, I should buy that dip, and then I didn't because I didn't have any liquid. That's just the way it is. I might buy this because I think it's going to break out one more time. And it should be a pretty straight shot. This is another resistance. So once it breaks this resistance right here at 546, yeah, I think it's very likely going to just kind of scoot on up towards the top. But then we need to find the... and there's not one, is there? This is different than IWM. IWM has an ascending wedge. If anything, this looks like it could be widening, which is quite different. Yeah, I run out of money all the time. Cool story, Booksy. April 7th through April 9th. Yeah, so I told you I traded down yesterday, and I was like, I should buy the dip, and then I didn't buy the dip, which is totally normal for me because I just didn't have the money in place at the right time. So this is a fine set. There's nothing wrong with this setup. I'm a little confused as to what is... let me see. It is widening. It's not the same. I tried really hard to use parallels, but it didn't work. So there's no way it's going to do that. It's not happening. Well, I guess the easiest thing to do would be to just look at where that intersects the top, which is at 555. There's probably nothing else to it. This already broke down once, so more than likely we're going to see it fan outward. So what may happen is that we don't have as big of well, I wouldn't say it wouldn't be explosive, but what may happen is that we get up here a little bit later in the day or even tomorrow. Friday, why not just explode to the upside? Why not? Maybe you can. I don't know. This isn't really unrealistic. If it's actually widening outward and it does continue to do so, then you may actually end up getting up there after all. It's a little late though, isn't it? So IWM kind of looks like it's done. It looks like it's really close, and it's hard for me to see it jumping that. SPY's a little bit different. There's certainly like a head and shoulder vibe going on right now. But I think there's a chance that this actually has a really crazy move left in it. I don't see why it doesn't go up farther though. I think it needs to go to like 555. 547 is just the top, which is fine. But I feel like they're going to trade here on the bottom if it's going to be bullish in the short-term future, not long-term necessarily. You want to trade right there. You can see it on the chart fairly clearly. Yeah, I guess it's just a matter of opinion. If you think it could potentially like push this resistance and go a bit higher, then it might do that. But I can't really say that it will for sure do that. You know, that's a little bit irresponsible. Because to me, it looks like the level is just an overhead. Just overhead, right? It's not necessarily going to go any further than that. Yeah, and there's Monday. That works the same way. So if you have a big push and then it sells off into Monday, it's probably going to look like this. Like it'll drop one more time. Which tells me that though there may be more upside here, I would guess that there's going to be like a lull period today going into the end of the day. So we may just barely get above the top here to like 549 and then land around 547 and then have one more big push in extended hours and then probably open high and just sell back down like immediately. It'll be a dangerous trade for options trading because I think you're going to miss a lot of the move, potentially. Meaning if it opens here at like 555 and it starts immediately selling off, there's not much distance between here and there. You pretty much just want to be out right then. But that actually completes it quite well. So I'm going to stick with 555. I think that's the number. I'm not going to go way beyond it. It may go beyond it, but I can't predict where it goes if it goes beyond it. Not right now. Yeah, like I'm just kind of staring at this thinking to myself that it would be silly to say, oh, it has to do this or has to do that if I just don't feel that way. So I don't feel like that's the case here. After that point, I think we're going to go into another downward motion. Now, if this is like what we talked about on IWM, then this is actually quite in some ways is like long-winded. You'd expect downside to potentially be until May 1st. Same thing. So that doesn't mean downside is forever. And in fact, you could actually still continue to advance in this area. It just means like that's the lower portion of the wave. That makes sense. So we would want to look back at the cross trends that are there. So I'm actually going to get rid of this. I'm not going to get rid of that one. I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm going to keep this, but I'll make it lighter. And we'll kind of delete some of these blocks that just kind of were there. So what I want to see are these two bottom lines most readily, and they're kind of hard to see right now. So I want to see those. Well, that seems about right. And then this is going to be like the area that needs to break. So here's what I'm thinking. If this is a wave up and this is a down wave, what this probably represents, because usually the downward wave is going to be facing resistance of some kind on the wave itself. It needs to retest this. So I would actually think that this probably does come lower, come quite low, going Monday into Tuesday next week. Same deal, I think, as IWM. I think you could see a pretty gnarly sell down to the first gap. I'm not convinced it needs to go to the second gap, but if it did, it could, because at this point, it's not like a full retracement, and it's already widening outward, so who knows. I'm not convinced it will. I'm just saying it could. I really don't know. So I think it's going to be another kind of throwaway week. And again, you could end up right back where you started, and that's the truth. There's a Friday right here at 550. It's pretty much the exact same as where it begins. So what I'm trying to say is that this should just push resistance and then approach it again going into the next week. If this is the middle low wave, it's going to be like a bounce, like a 1-2 and then a bottom. And then probably something like this. Probably that's it. Like that's the lower wave. So this has a 1-2 on the top. This has like a 1-2 on the bottom. It's bullish, so it's not looking really flat. It's looking like really high, which also is normal. Because if you think about this as like a bullish wave, if this is 1 and it's pushing higher, 2 might hit a resistance, but it also could push higher. And that's the weird thing about this is it doesn't look like, it kind of makes you think like that's it, it's done. But that's not actually the case. Because if this has a high trend, and you'll see what I mean in just a second, then this actually makes sense that it could go farther up. Because if you have this going up on a particular trend, like this could be the low still, but it's like this could actually make an advancement earlier, and it just really depends on how steep it is. You easily can make an advancement. So it looks like it's the second M, but it's actually small, and it's actually like a bottom. It's just really bullish. So it did exceed the top, but then the next one, the last one, and I've seen it a couple times, and it usually misleads me because I think it's, oh, like that's not the bottom, right? So you don't think about it coming back down yet. And then when it comes back down, you think, uh-oh, the M is done. Like it's not going to go anymore. And I've done that more than a couple times. So I know that that's a mistake I've made in the past. This actually is fine because if it's really bullish, you might see something extremely volatile, which it is. You might see something with a lot of extremity. And this could actually make a higher peak as it approaches like a level of resistance, which it should be. And then the next one, if it does that, there's a lot of what ifs here. But yeah, if the next one does that, then the jump would go probably all the way up to 583. And that's where I thought it was going to be. So like a while back. It's like that's the level that everybody's going towards, is that March. I can't say it enough. It's like that March 4th level has always been kind of in view. So this actually works really well. Let's ditch some of these other lines. They're great to have to some degree, but they're also, a lot of these are like redundant. So I'm going to get rid of them. I don't really care about that one. Let's get rid of it. That's fine. It's the top, but again, I don't really care that much right now. This one is less relevant than the one on top of it. Those aren't really interacting with where we are now anyways. Let's make this lighter, just so it's not like in our face. Same deal with this one. Yeah, that's better. And that works quite well, because this actually now gives me, oh, this is really good, because you see that now the trend is where it should be here. I think we got it. I think this is it, because last time we did this, I didn't have that middle, and I could not figure out, I thought it was a lot steeper, which is what screwed us over when we came down here. It broke up, and I was like, well, the squeeze should still be on, and it is, but it ended up coming back really low. It's creating like a bottom here, like it did back here. The risk, of course, being that this fails and drops down, is still a very real risk. It's not like it couldn't do anything but this. Of course, this could be the place right here that you have danger, I suppose. It would be the most difficult place to trade it in some ways, because you'd have to see that breakout and then ultimately do it again at like 550. But I'm thinking that if it goes up there and it follows this wave pretty neatly, then I don't know why you can't be up here by beginning of May. And news aside, that actually works quite well. Now the timing on this may be a little bit off, so let's take a look. So the first one, it broke the creek there, and then broke the creek here. I got rid of that line. So we were looking at it as like, all right, maybe there, and then it jumps the creek here, which is going into the weekend of the first, roughly. So that actually implies it could be higher before then, not on a Friday. I wonder why I had that on a Friday. There's no way to know. Could have two really good Fridays in a row. And then this roughly would be the estimation of that next top. So this actually could go for quite a while. That blue line that I got, I kept it on there because that was the original trend here. I'm thinking that that's used as like a distribution line at the top, more than likely. So this would be a great place to like redistribute and then drop back down. This actually does a really good job of framing this. I don't want to get rid of all these ideas that I have, but because some of them are pretty good ideas, but this actually looks quite right. And then you really have like a chop period. This is where you decide if you're going to go up or not going into June. And it may seem like this is bearish or something, and it kind of looks like that, but it's not really, because I mean, at the end of the day, could this just come back down to here, like 512, and then break back out again? Yeah, I mean, there's not like a one size fits all here. That's silly. To me, that might even make sense, because you've got this gap that's been created, and it would be like retesting this big, gigantic wedge. So instead of like advancing right away, it fails, and then it comes through here to retest these trends that it didn't hit. And yeah, and then it breaks out, and this is roughly around the 28th. So if it's bullish, this is pretty reasonable. It's weird seeing like these cross-ups, because when you look at them like big picture, you're like, oh, well, if it drops here and then it creates a wave back up, it certainly could generate like pretty big move into June. I don't think it'd go up there all at once, but that's fine. Where's the timer here? Let me see. Yeah, that's June 11th. July 11th. I think I mistyped it. It should have been July 11th, not June 11th. I put that on there in the wrong spot. But yeah, certainly if you were going to come back up again, If you finish this wave and it's bullish, it hits those marks, then it breaks down again because it is weak. Really, at that point, you could have a pretty nasty sell down. But this then generates like a larger potential wave, if that's the case. Yeah. And I know that the people don't think that it's going to be a bullish year, but I wouldn't, like I've already kind of looked at it. I don't think I'd be that surprised if it does come up again before it comes down. Because that widening would lead you back to the top here at 600 basically, like right here. That's where the widening starts. Starts right at 600. So as weird as it sounds, that's like a June run up to 600. Then what? I don't know. Backwards, I guess. It'd have to come back and retest 560s. These areas right here, 570s. No matter what. And then you could potentially break down or go again. That's later. It looks right. When you look at the RSI and you see the widening happening, it's still going on. So the volatility is still like cranking up. So you could easily see how like on the 1 hour, this has widened out and now we're still in that widening, but if it breaks to the upside, there's not really an expectation it goes down unless it just fails right here. There really couldn't be much of an expectation for more downside right now. But if it's really volatile and this comes down again next week and then it breaks out again, you could see this go really high and then sort of chop. And it would probably come back pretty harsh later on. Spend a little more time at the top. Yeah, and that makes sense as a middle then, because then you have 1 right here, 2, then that's the 3, and then the breakdown is just a hook. It's like that diagram I drew. It was just a doodle. It was just kind of to get the idea across, but that's what I would expect. This would probably have an SOW or something if that occurs. Why can't it just do an S-curve and go like all the way up there? I mean, it can, but easy come, easy go. Like if it went ahead and shot all the way up to like 575 or 580, I think it would probably dump really hard. It's better to have that walk up and then do it more properly. I think this generates a healthier retracement in the end. It's still nasty in the end, but it's not nearly what it could be. If it goes straight up, I'd be really nervous. It's going to come crashing hard. We'll see. Squeeze is a squeeze, so this seems very likely to me. Whiplash, right? Never gonna happen, Booksy. Dude, there's always something in the chart that would support this. And really, we got to look back and see where these bull trends are. This is one that I'd look at right here. I'm specifically looking at 0.1, 2, and then 3. That indicates 600. This is the trend. This is a weakness. Trend hit, hook, drop. So support in the beginning, resistance at the end. Why didn't you use the higher one? I mean, I could have, but I think this is the auto reaction, and then it made a SOW. So I'm going to use the, instead of using the SOW, I'm going to use the first reaction there. And then you use where it dropped, and you can see that lines up with that middle. So this does support that. This is like the trend that was lost. And there's probably more. I mean, I already did one right here. So there's a lot of indication that May is very, very bullish. But that first, you have to have this backup. Yeah. Yeah, there's a head and shoulder here, but it's a head and shoulder on a bottom. I'm not saying it looks particularly great. It doesn't. But I mean, you just got to take it for what it is right now. What are you saying? You saying that it's not bad? I'm saying that while that could be bad, I already looked at this and I like tried to determine where that shoulder would be. And that's the neckline. It's not like way up high. I mean, there is a potential for a lower neck, but it's been following the higher neckline. So this is head right here, 1-to-1. So that's the neckline. I mean, worst case, it's like slightly lower. But take that value and just do like a 50%. It's like a 51% thing. And drag it to the neckline. Where does it go? Well, okay, so it could break as low as, I don't know, like 265. Where is the bottom here? 265. Why not just draw the neck like straight across? Because it's not the neckline. I mean, you can't just say it's a neckline. It did not hold, it didn't come all the way down to 268. We got close. Like, yeah, it did. I don't know. This is like a penny off. Maybe it did hit 268, and that's the neckline. Fine. Even still, it's like, all right, let's see where that goes, you know. Okay, so it goes back down to this bottom. That could be thought of as an SOW, possibly, but it also could be like a local spring right here, because if this is an auto reaction in a phase B top, then all you have to do is dive beneath 265. And if it double bottoms here, that's not bearish. If it drops below the 262, then I'll be like, sure, that's an SOW. But a double bottom, that's not bearish. Oh, but then it's a bigger head and shoulder, Booksy. And it's just going to keep going. Yes, I'm aware. I know what a head and shoulder looks like. I promise you I know what it looks like. Okay? I do. I promise. And yes, there's definitely a shouldering motion. If you want a bear case, that's it. It's a head and shoulder that turns into another head and shoulder and just keeps breaking down, so on and so forth. You know? I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's not impossible. I don't feel like it's there yet. I think you have to wait for that breakdown. So yeah, this would be another one that, again, it's like, does this go below the bottom? No. Wait, you already have these on the chart, Booksy? Yes. You've already done this measurement? Yes. I've already done this measurement. Here's why I'm not particularly concerned, not yet anyways, because even though this is attempting like a head and shoulder, these are making like higher lows even on this bottom. And on the whole, it's just doing a really good job making higher lows and checking creeks. I might be a little bit concerned long term, yeah, if it keeps breaking down, that it then goes pretty low. But even in the way that it's set up right now, it's not going back through the bottom, which is an interesting thing. Well, could that still be bullish if it does that? I thought you said it can't break this or it can't break that. You have to understand, like, there's a difference between like short term and long term in terms of like what that would indicate. Because yes, like that could be bearish short term, but the bearish and short term with a head and shoulder is complete when the head and shoulder is complete. If there's no other neckline break and this is just a complex head and shoulder and it breaks there, like what else is there? Where's the next neckline? There isn't one, right? So like it's just a big, deep retracement. And in the end of the day, like I know that that's not completely bullish, but it's also not like hysterically bearish either. It would just be like retracing back down to near an 854 level, which is pretty sensible. Also potentially retracing to this creek, which is also sensible. So I'm finding that to be a bit of almost like a non-issue. It's only an issue if you think that the stock only goes up and it can't possibly have these deep retracements, and that if it goes down, it means it's going to keep going down. I don't think that's the case here, though. You know, if we were looking at these bottoms that are being generated from the top, you could make an argument that it's creating these waves out, and it is. And that's what I'm saying. It's breaking out and up. This is the only major weakness I see right here. It looks like it could drop down, in my opinion, and I thought it might do it today. It looked like it could drop down to 267. But 267 is not like dead. That's just like a completion of that first shoulder mark if you do the high shoulder. So it just kind of brings it back down to this floor. But that's nothing controversial. Like anyone could look at this and suggest that might happen here. So it's like widening right now and it breaks down there. Okay, then what? All right, that doesn't mean anything. A bear and a bull could look at that and say that's probably going to happen. That's what I'm trying to suggest. Like it doesn't really mean anything. If the market then goes on squeeze mode into Monday, it's hard to imagine AMC just chilling out. But sure, like it could. It could have some kind of like weird, like latent pump that doesn't go anywhere. And then, just chops here until Monday. And then Monday is down and it goes back to the next shoulder mark. And then you're just like, okay, now what, Or the next bottom, you know what I mean? It's like that in and of itself certainly doesn't look great. But it'd be hard for me to look back at this and say that's 100% like bearish price action. What I would suggest is that even in the midst of this could be like an auto reaction top and then a spring. If this is a phase B bottom right here and it's generating the most up it's going to get before a drop, then absolutely that could be the case. If it's not, could it still be a spring? I mean, it's not great, but yeah, it could be. Like this same exact thing could happen down low now and then generate like a spring motion that does actually go to another low. But this is almost the exact same as the thing we talked about in the stream the other day where like it's just higher up. It's just distributing upward like in hook motions as opposed to dropping down into a spring motion. Does this change the outcome is the question. No, not in my opinion, no. You're an idiot, Booksy. It's going to go low. It's going to go beneath the bottom here. Okay, we'll see. I genuinely don't think it makes any sense to do that without going up at some point. But I could see the case based on like shorter term unbalanced volume. There's certainly a case that it could come back down again. I just don't see it as a big deal. I'm kind of just sitting here like, well, who cares? Like, so what? It really doesn't make a huge difference to me, whether it's one way or the other. I don't personally care. Because I think either way could end up being kind of bullish. It really is about perception and like what you think this and that and the other happens afterwards. If that makes a lower low and then it springs out, it's going to jump the creek really early if this is as high as it's going to go right here. Because then it would jump the creek like way down here, It just sets up really low. And then you have this huge amount of space from 252 all the way up to 3. You're just going to get that much bigger of a move, in my opinion. So I just don't see this as like, oh, it's going to go and then just slide off the cliff. Some people are going to disagree with that. They're going to say, I think it's just going to slide off a cliff. Like, okay. I just don't see I don't find it to be convincing. And like I said before, AMC, when it does develop in a bullish way, usually uses the middle, which is around 283. That's right where you kind of want it to be because that's the previous bottom at 284. It uses the middle. It kind of compresses down anyways. And then it uses that well, I call it LSPY sometimes. It's really like the middle. So there's always like a flattening before you drop into the range and the bigger reaction happens. That flattening ends up being like a liquid center going forward, which is right where we are right now. So naturally you're like, sure, if it rejects off this, is it possible that this ends up being kind of bearish? Yeah. If it goes down low here and it doesn't recover high above it going into Friday, we might say that Monday looks kind of shot, right? It looks like kind of could go either way, and it mostly looks bearish, right? It would look bad if it sort of stopped short of underneath here, right? So I get it. I'm with you guys on that. I am. But I'm also like sitting here thinking like what all that's really required is like that a big move on like a Friday goes up to the top. Like what, which is, I mean, it's high. Because like that's a lot, Booksy. Yeah, I know. We could use similar methodology and talk about the arcs if you want. I don't know exactly how else to say it other than to say it's pointing really high. And that AMC likes to have like this really slow. I was taking my wife to the airport this morning, and we were talking about whether or not she was going to be on time for the flight. And we were getting there a little late. We had an hour and a half. And I'm like, well, this is the smaller of the airports. It's a Thursday. I was like, you're probably going to be fine. But she said to me, well, I'd like to hurry and wait. Like get there quickly and then have time to wait. And then I thought about it on the way home, and I was like, AMC is like the opposite. It's like wait and hurry. It likes to wait till the last minute. It's like a procrastinating stock. It waits to the last minute, and you end up with this really horrible looking setup sometimes where people are going to be divided about it, and then it just goes, right? It always does that. Look at any of the runs that are really massive. There's not a single one that didn't have like substantial downside or something like that right before it. There's always some big dip. There's always some craziness that happens. And the market usually is going without AMC. So I'm of the opinion that like that's totally normal for this stock. And it would be totally normal to have a little head and shoulder here that looks like it's going to break down and have a bigger one that looks like it's going to break down. But then it just bounces. Like that to me would be very normal. Par for the course, so to speak. If we use the same methodology that we used on the other chart, and I'll go to the 6 minute and we'll try to like lock this in. This is why I'm like, I don't think this is the kind of trade that is going to present itself as it's super bullish. I think it was Mr. Momo talking about like, well, my calls aren't doing anything. And I'm like, no, mine aren't either. They're kind of just chopping around between 5 and 8 cents. And they keep back and forth between them. But I wouldn't expect them to go anywhere because this is very flat and sideways. Like I would not expect them to move until the stock is ready to go. This is pretty tight. So maybe 2 possibilities here because there's slightly different marks. But they're not that different. It's not almost like negligible. I kind of don't want to do both of them, but I'm going to do both of them. Right. So this is the wave middle. I'm pretty sure. You can see the support, the weakness, distribution, hook, drop. I mean, gosh almighty. It's the same thing on every flipping chart, you know. When you watch it and you're looking for it, you're like, oh, there it is. It's really, there's nothing different. There's nothing new under the sun when it comes to these drops. They're all like exactly the same. So yeah, that's it right there. That's the wave. Man, I'm telling you guys, if this drops down, I'm pretty sure like it has a very strong possibility that this afternoon, and I know it seems weird because it seems kind of backwards from the rest of the market. I'm not saying it has to. That might be the dip right there yesterday. This looks like a 1, 2, 3, 4 to me. So it looks like it's missing like one more push. There's a 1, 2, 3 here. Bounce, bounce. That could be it. 1, 2, 3. I don't know, man. To me, it looks like it's ready to go back down. And then as soon as that happens, it's going to build out. I think tomorrow is going to be unusually explosive if this works out, because you'd have it pump all the way back up to, I don't even know how this is possible, but you'd have it pump all the way back up to the top. It should go above definitely this creek, this red one. So I wasn't sure maybe if we don't go till Monday. I guess if it were to hook, it would do it right here. Some kind of like fake out motion, but it's hard to say why you would do that. And see, you see a head and shoulder, but I see something I really actually like quite a bit, which is this is a 1-2, and then this is a cat ear. Do you see it? So like, yeah, like I get it. It's a head and shoulder. I'm not ignorant of that. But I see a cat ear that if it makes like a higher low is super freaking bullish. Like this is that pattern that I look for. I love to see that bounce because it's super easy to see it when it happens. This just came really low, but if it makes a higher low here, it should just go right back up. It's that same pattern that we always stare at on this channel. So when you triangulate it, you can see that the SOS value is right here. It has to be at this peak. It has to be, because that's where the hook was, and it's also where this pumps up. So this range now has to be defined by an LPS or a spring here, one of the two. One of those two has to happen, and then you'd have to jump over this creek coming down. That would have to occur as well. So there may actually be more to this than I'm drawing. I don't want to get too nitty-gritty on it, but I will do my due diligence here. So if it doesn't go, let's say it doesn't go up again. That's the cat ear. There's a weakness right here. It's going to go down to this creek cross. I will not say I guarantee it, but I basically guarantee it. It will go down to this guy right here. It's probably going to do like an 854 retracement or something and come back down to like 267. All right. And everybody's going to say it looks like garbage, but really it's just different. And then this one, which actually isn't quite right. It may come down quite fast. So it like comes into here and then it has to generate a bottom, right? In order for this to continue. So if it drops and it goes beneath 272, there's a good chance it's going to come all the way down to 267. If it holds up, then it's already finished. This is the dip. It's just not going to go down. An M cross can go up or down. Correct? We talk about it a lot here. This second one is going to have the little tiny cat ears. If it jumps over, it's going to just go. So it would just come up. It looks like an SOS, and then it just goes. If it doesn't, it's pretty obvious. It's like a hook. It just pumps up and then dumps. Could even be like an up thrust that goes quite high and then dumps. Does that, both of those things. The only way this is strong is if it holds right here. Does that make sense? Yeah, they left a gap. There's a weird like intraday gap right here on the 6-minute chart up to 275. So it almost looks like regardless, it probably comes up to, really it closed up here at 276. It probably comes up to 276. That's also the creek. Like that's the main, one of the main, I wouldn't call it even a creek at this point. It's just one of the fans because it keeps pushing them. That's one of those fan levels. So it certainly is exactly where it should be. If it's going to try to break, it's got to get over these two areas right here at 276. If it's going to fail, that's a perfect place to fail. It's just a quick push and then a dump. So if it dumps, it's going to come all the way back down to 267 pretty quick. All right, and then we have to wait and see, right, going into Friday, probably. All right, but if it rallies, there should be already built into this, and I think there is. I think it's right here. I have it on the chart, and what I look for is the initial uptrend, and like where did that uptrend fail, and then did it retest it again? And it did. There's like multiple. There's 1, 2, 3 in the beginning. There's 2 at the end, including a hook. Then there's a gap up from there, and then there's a hook beneath it. This is a little different than some of the others that I've done because it's like kind of an average. And I'm looking at that as like, that's probably where it is. It could be like slightly higher or slightly lower, but it's somewhere around here. Okay, I'm just looking as best I can because there's a multiple hits there. You could pick any one, but it's roughly right there. my expectation if this is bullish is that it's going to push the next creek up. So right now, this middle line, and maybe it'd be better to make this one a different color now. I'll just do orange. So the red line is the creek right now. It has to push the creek. Like, that needs to happen. So where is it going to go? Well, there's a gap right there, and it actually goes quite high. Now, I'm not saying it will fill this gap, but there is a gap, and it closed at 296, which is the level that I told everybody on the Discord that I thought it's probably going to come up to 296. I already have it marked off, so I don't know why I did it again. I just did it again. I marked off 296 because that's the level that I thought it was going to come back up to. And I was like, yeah, it's probably going to come to 296. So at this point, we've got now two potential intersections here, 1, 2, that are pointing towards 296 Monday. Again, could this be a little higher, a little lower? Yeah. So is this triangulation guaranteed? No. But like I said, it doesn't really matter. If it comes down low, as long as this makes a higher low and then it breaks back out here on a Friday, guys, it could be all the way up there before Monday, basically. Do I think it has to go that high all in one day? No. Could it be that it's a little green on Monday while the rest of the market's red already? Maybe. Could it be that I'm off by a few hours? Yeah. Like, I don't know exact things. I mean, it could be close. Maybe we get a second move on Monday and it does get up there, but it's like, we don't know like where we're going to be at exactly. Anyways, so I would expect there to be a push though of some kind of this resistance. And then once that happens, you're going to have another resistance line. So if this hits 296 at some point or close to it, it fills that gap or gets close to it, then we're going to have like a new creek, right? And that's kind of where the rub is, because that gives us a sense of timing later. That's really important because we don't have that yet. It might. I got my pre-order in for the Switch 2 yesterday. Guys like, you don't have the money to do that, Booksy. I know, but I told my son I'd do it, and I'll try to afford it. That's what I said to him. I was like, I'll figure it out. Got 2 months. Yeah, it was brutal. I was in line in the internet. I don't know how that works, but they put me in line on the internet, and I ended up getting it at like, I don't know. I was in line from like 11 a.m. or 11 p.m. until after midnight. I think an hour and 30 minutes or something. That was a long time. And then they were like, you have 10 minutes to make this purchase. And their button didn't work. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I was angry. But I figured it out. I just added like a whole bunch of stuff to the cart all at once. They were like, a lot of people bought this. And I was like, just do it. And then I took all the stuff off the cart that I didn't want. I was like, got it. And then GameStop, theirs is at 11. So they're dealing with that too. But yeah, I don't think it's going to make a huge dent, but it's possible. So anyways, this is what I would expect if it's like hyper bullish. Those look like they're the opposite, don't they? Yeah. This is another thing I've noticed on AMC is that a lot more than other stocks lately. And I feel like this is probably part of this scheme is there seems to always be like a bear and bull case that's built around the liquid center, and it's meant to kind of throw you off. Like almost always, this feels like the case. Like right now, it certainly looks on the 6-minute more bearish than bullish because of the RSI. But I really genuinely do think this is part of the I don't know, the misleading nature, I suppose, in the market is that these are quite strikingly opposite moves, like almost perfectly. And that doesn't surprise me. I mean, they're generating like right in the middle of liquidity 2 possibilities. But I don't necessarily think in this case that either one is particularly bearish. I'll tell you why. Because when this came down, like, it is already in play that this could come back lower again. And I feel like it's pretty straightforward, but you can take a marker here to here, for example, and you can see that trend that was built. And that to me is like, oh, so it could come back down. But I also think that, like, when those things build out after a bounce, that's not an inevitability. It's just kind of there as like a potential place later. Maybe we come back later, right? And we've been talking about this. I don't know. Those things generate on every single top and bottom, so you can take it with a grain of salt. But I feel that that's pretty normal. Like, this is a resistance, final resistance, jump, support. It's the same thing as saying support, resistance when we do it the opposite way. That's the cross right there. So they've already generated like a downtrend here. And it's certainly not impossible that this dips down and even hits that, and still comes back out. I just don't think there's any need to do it. Like, that's all it comes down to. How many times have I said that and been wrong enough that you should, again, take it with a grain of salt? I've said, I don't think they need to get that gap. And then they go for it anyways, right? But this to me looks like the more bullish outcome here. And then you would have like a final. So you would drop below this trend, and that would be the final one. You would not necessarily advance again. You could, but you don't have to. It really just depends on where this reaction takes place. Because it doesn't need to go higher if it creates a second top, potentially. But it's not like, I just don't know. Like, I have no idea, because I have no idea where that may occur. If we assume that Wednesday into Wednesday are pretty similar, then yeah, this might actually still push up above. But what I mean is that it won't come above like the final, whatever the final top is. It won't make a new push. Because at that point, you're now in sell down mode where you're getting ready to go. The compression is happening. So this line is like already there. It's done. It's not going to change. So I think that's likely what happens, is that if it goes up, it may have a little bit of a weakness here, and then it drops and then pushes out, but it would come back beneath it. And it probably does like a 50-50 down through it, roughly, going into May 6th, right before earnings, around that time period. So we're looking at that as like the very likely outcome here, in my opinion, if it's bullish. And again, is it possible that you're wrong and it's going to do this kind of compression? Sure, but I mean, again, I'm like just staring at it. It just looks like a wedging action to me. It doesn't look really that different on the whole in terms of the movements, aside from like this initial move. You're like, it's the opposite. Like a little bit. But other than that, I'm like, you still could develop like a bullish bottom here, just a sell down that then breaks out. So I don't have any real worries about it. This is a good setup, and thus far it's stayed very good. So I'm not at this point hitting any kind of panic buttons. And if you're wondering like what panic would look like, it really is not. It's not happened yet. It would be some kind of a weakness here early on, and that might again be temporary, but it would certainly be some kind of weakness early on, and it hasn't happened yet. There's nothing here that's really said, hey, this is gonna go backwards or something. It just hasn't happened. So you can be bearish, that's fine, but thus far, like, I'm not seeing anything that indicates it's bearish other than the potential head and shoulder. Dead inside because of AMC. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to try not to be like hype train about it either. I know that it's easy to do that kind of stuff, but I'm going to try not to do that. There's more than one way that these things can go, and obviously don't want to be putting too many eggs in one basket, but I'm not yet at the point, like I said, I'm just not there yet where I'm like, oh, this is somehow gonna be bad, or I'm like, no, it's fine. As long as if this has a push down, as long as it breaks back up, it's fine. If it has a hook, then you're gonna know it, and then you just have to watch. I mean, it's not complicated. It's very simple. GME, I haven't really charted it locally, to be honest. I'm not really seeing anything here except for this walk down. It looks like what's happening is they're cooling off the RSI while they're kind of chopping it. So what I guess what I had expected was that this would break out and then hold, potentially come back up later. And I haven't, again, recharted it. You can see this was a really decent triangulation for GME. It's on top of that now, so I don't know. Even if it distributed, it could come back down and check that creek. It'd still be okay. Like locally, I mean. I don't see anything standing out right now as like, oh, it's going to tank. This looks like a good cool off of RSI while it's still ascending. And again, the creek retest could be quite low. I mean, it could be at not hugely low, but like could be $1 off, 226.30 or something like that. And that would be a retest. Let me see if there's another marker here. Hold on. That's pretty far up there. It's that guy. I think it's this guy. Well, Jimmy did a good job of obscuring it, I think. So I don't see it. That's it, right there. Yeah, that's it. Support, hook. They may have used this to help better define that, this bottom and this bottom. So I'm thinking that this is correct. And it did, I think it approached it already and just didn't go all the way. So I had thought it would come up to the top and hit something around there, but it didn't get there. That's okay. But I did say I thought it would come back, so I don't know. I'm trying to remember when I did this. I don't remember exactly. Yeah, so it's intersecting where it needs to right up here. So if it goes up and we have like a market-wide kind of squeeze Friday, it may only hit like 30, you know? I think what we mentioned is that, where is Monday start? I might have done the wrong one. AMC and GME look like they could have a little bit of extra fuel in the tank going in Monday. They may not be down immediately. And frankly, SPY might not be down either. It might just be more flat. And AMC and GME, who knows at that point. If they're going with the market, if that's the case, and we do get this lift Friday, Monday would be kind of a red to sideways day. But you could see a... sort of like another top here going up to like 32. And I don't know, GME is a completely different beast than AMC. But one thing we could do is we can see if this is generating like another creek down that is a reasonable expectation for us, and it is. So this already has one. It looks way off, but that's because of the way I drew it over here. It's probably done on not a tiny time frame. This is a 6-minute time frame. Why is that way over here? Why am I doing stuff like that, Booksy? It's dumb. Actually, it's not that low. It's pretty high up there. That's where that is. So it does look like it's trying to get down there maybe by Monday. The thing is with these things is a lot of times this is like an inverted pivot potentially. So we talk about pivots. I've been talking about pivots a lot when I talk about the top triangulations. Like I'm always worried it's a pivot. But the truth is that the bottom triangulation should also be a pivot, because waves don't just work one direction, they're both directions. So if you're generating it 2 times, this does indicate that about noontime, maybe about mid-afternoon on Monday, could be like the high point. I think it could be up to like 32. If that ends up being like an inverted pivot, it seems pretty likely. I don't remember what this is, but I want to get rid of it. It's too much stuff on there. Boxes upon boxes upon boxes. Yeah, so let's say this squeezes and it doesn't really check it. I mean, if it checks it on the way out, a lot of that stuff could happen on Friday, and it could be more slow and controlled. If it really doesn't check it much, and we don't see a move until, for whatever reason, until like Monday, I don't know. I mean, you could do something like that, or it's like delayed and it goes. It's so many different options. But if it doesn't test it, one or the other, then when this is done, I think we get to these points where it's like there should be a breakdown. If the trend is finished, and that is an S-curve right there, pretty clean S-curve. If the trend is finished and it completes that S-curve, it goes up to like 32 or something, wherever in this zone that we thought it was going to be in, then there should be some breakdowns that happen. So like the next thing I would look for is like what trends would break. So if this drops beneath here, I think it's a little bit of an SOW, a sign of weakness, because that's an ongoing trend right now. It's hit 1, 2, 3. This would be 4 times. So it doesn't matter if it does it now or it does it later. If it breaks out and goes down, or if it goes down and then breaks out, makes very little difference. If that happens, now it's breaking below there, then we would look at that and suggest that that's probably going to be a point of interest later. So for example, let's just pretend we don't have any information yet about how this works, but let's pretend this goes up a little bit, but then it goes down into a spring. Again, it could be completely the opposite. Doesn't really matter. Let's just say it does that. Well, my first instinct would be that this is now an SOW, so it broke through that trend. So when it comes back through it, I don't necessarily think it holds up very well the next time it comes back, because it's usually like the early indication that like, hey, we want to go down. The market's like, we want to go get liquidity below this trend again. And so there could be like a series of, waves up here that look kind of bullish and they're pushing up higher, and it's really like a distribution, and then it chops finally through. And normally, again, what I'd look for is like, what does the chart then say, where do you go next? And I think that's usually fairly easy, because you have an SOW here, and that usually ends up being like the first zone for the breakdown, and it probably ends up being like right around the top here, because that would be something that would go unchecked. As it stays elevated during a distribution, it usually doesn't, it has like a 1 weakness and then it stays elevated, because they're trying to keep it up to sell off, because people think it's going to run and it's not ready yet, and then it drops down. And this would be the retest area, because it's the previous top. I'm going to leave this on the chart, and even if it's wrong, I'm not sure if it will be. It could be wrong, but like I'm not saying it will be. I'm just saying even if it is, well, I bet if we come back in like a week or 2 time, we're going to see this particular top right here where this drop off was is probably where we're back on this wave after the S curve finishes. We'll come back to that. And then you have so that green was kind of like a loose version of it. Then you have like a whole nother series of like checks that would then happen, right? Potentially. because then you're looking back at these and you're saying, okay, well, we broke out here, you know, and now we have to come back even lower to retest that. And then you can look backwards at like what levels are you going to go to, yada, yada, yada. We're not there yet. But yeah, all of this stuff kind of makes sense. The way it's setting up, if it's an S curve, it's going to do this sideways business, have a dip, and then rocket. But it's probably going to be the end of the move for now, just so you're aware. And then look, there's the double bottom for the double top. Oh no, the inversion. What does that mean? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Honestly, like, don't put a lot into stuff like that, because, like, I guess it could happen. I just don't know why it would happen. We'd have to look and find a good reason. It'd be like a 1, 2, 3, 4, where there's a middle here. And this is like the big first ear. There's a middle, and then there's a second ear. And it drops down on a wave. It comes back down to 24 again, or 2250 if it does that from this height. But honestly, I'd have to find like a middle. Yeah, there certainly would have to be like evidence. So this is like a 1, yeah, 1, and then the middle, and then 2. And then there'd have to be evidence that it comes back there. I don't see it. Certainly that would be the break. And then this would be, yep, there'd be like a dip and then a rip. Maybe a little dip here and then a rip back up. I mean, honestly, if it went like that far, it'd be crazy high, but I don't think that's going to happen. Who knows? It's GME. I think what's more likely is this is just going up to get overbought, and then it's going to drop the other way again. This looks right to me, like a sell-off, buy up, sell-off, buy up. And if the second sell-off comes down and it holds supports, especially some of those early ones, it'd be pretty strong. Even though I don't really want it to break through the ice here, I think it actually could be fine. That would make sense because there wasn't a retest on this, and I can't even remember what this is. But if it's on the chart, it's important. So there was no retest of this marker, and not near 24. Seems a little bit low. Maybe not. What are you going to do, Buxy? Maybe not. Maybe it's destined to come back this way. At least once. Yeah, maybe. Why would it do that, though? I don't know. Maybe you need to get back on top of this curve. This was a dump beneath it. This would be a big cross up over it. And then if it holds up high enough and you dump backwards, you come back down to this on the 12th. Leave from like 24 instead of leaving from up high. It's a little odd. But we've seen this kind of stuff before on some stocks, that crazy rapid fire shakeout. I don't know. I'd have to kind of wait it out if it did that. I would be really, really, really worried it's going to be bearish because it looks a lot more like the bearish outcome than the bullish, doesn't it? Anyways, we're not there yet. Let's just wait. A lot of it's going to depend on this, I think. I'm just wondering if it ended up coming back down again, would it really be so bad? And I'm trying to think about what else we could imply here, and I'm not sure. I'll say this: if it comes back to like 22 or 2250, it needs to. I think the buy-in is then right above here at like 26. I don't think this is the buy-in for the bottom, because you're making a big assumption that it's going to definitely run through that and that needs to be broken. But I actually do think that it could technically come down that low. I'm looking at these levels, and it'd probably be okay. As if this is like the bottom, I don't know, it's already bad. I don't know, because it did come lower. I don't know. There's a lot of things here that suggest it's trying to get back to 17. So there have to be some change of character. But a change of character could be a high or low with a recapture. So I'm trying to say. But that's not something I can really predict until we see it happen. We'd have to sort of wait it out. Because it's like saying that you're going to predict a fake out or something. You can say it's possible, but you can't really say it's definitely going to happen. So like, that's way too poker for me, you know? It's like, I don't really care to go that way. I can see the possibility. I'll just say it's there. But I'm not going to suggest that it's definitely going to do that and break out. It'd have to be some kind of fake out, which doesn't really fake out in the end, because it would be a higher low that just starts like a new trend. Yeah. I mean, like, nothing has really changed since yesterday, too. I was looking at this yesterday on Tesla, and I was like, where is it going to go? And I was like, I really know where to go. If it goes overhead, it's just barely out, and then it probably has to stop. But it's coming up to this. So part of me looks at this, and I'm like, oh, it's consolidating. It's going to break out. But then I'm like, well, that's the widening. So if you're going to break out there, it's probably just going to fly. It almost like doesn't make a lot of sense, because then the cross for this is really low. I think it's like right here. So part of me wonders if what's going to happen is that this does a kind of breakout, but it's like a up thrust, you know? And it's the same as everything else, where it goes up on like Friday or something and then has like a massive drop after. It's already lost this trend too. This is going to seem really odd to try to, again, predict this. Certainly it could just come up, find support, and try to go up and have kind of a little rip here back to like 270. Yeah, that's in the right spot, 271. Going into Monday. If you wait till Friday, then 271, that area works pretty well. You're kind of right there. And you could probably make a case just based on this setup that it could come back up to 283 if it holds here. It's just a really big move on a Friday again. But part of me wonders if this has got this, because it does have a dip in the middle, which is a weird dip to make. To not follow through on that is very odd. It's like the AMC one. It came down lower already. So it's like, oh, well, maybe that's just like the spring. But it's so early in the range. It's odd. I don't know. I'm bad with stuff like that. If it's not in the right spot, I got to be honest with you guys. Like, if it's not in the right spot, I'm always like, it's probably bad, because I just can't imagine what it is. I'm having like issues trying to like figure out what that's supposed to be. In some ways, it's just a bear flag, right? But that's what I'm trying to say is, like, from a Wyckoffean perspective, that is like a weakness. You need to see it follow through. From like a normal trader's perspective, this is just like a loose bear flag, right? It's like, well, it's just chopping down. So yeah, I mean, it could easily be this situation where it drops to 246 or something and it doesn't recover, right? In which case, oh, that's in the right spot too. And it's also sitting on the liquidity level where it would reject. So this is like a situation where it's rejecting off the liquidity. It's not ready to go, but it still wants to go. So what they would do is like dive down for liquidity, and it'd be a bear trap, because bears would be like, oh, it's going to dump, because this looks very bearish from that. And you're like, why didn't it just dump then? I'm not saying it couldn't go really low. That's always a possibility, but I'm legitimately wondering about some things, and I'm thinking about this in terms of like a trap, because I think that if it's ready to go and for whatever reason there's not enough kind of oomph to go, it's the same thing with AMC where it's in a position where it's easy to see it drop. I think this is where it goes, and it actually probably does like a fake out. So you get some kind of like up thrust, and it goes down. And then that's where like there's a really nice sell down into like oversold territory or something. It does some kind of a bizarre little reversal here. Why does that have to be bizarre? It just has to be something. And then you're like, it has to be bizarre? No, like it has to be a reversal is what I mean. And then you'd have like a press, a backup. And this is all kind of in the right spot for that. Here. Somewhere around there. Then where does it go? So this is an interesting one because it does not have... It kind of does, doesn't it? Oh, it's right there. It's right here. I see it right there. It's ugly. I wonder if that's like a really far up one. I'm looking right here at this breakdown, but doesn't match the place that it actually crossed over right there. It's a little off. So I'm not sure. Well, now it does. If you go to the lowest low right there in that area, now it matches very well right here. That's a weird line, but that's like the lowest low, and then it comes above, builds a support on it right here, drops it, and then jumps over it. And this ends up being the major interaction. Drop down, react through it, drop down. Yeah. That's really far. That's a big move. But then again, you know, it is, but it isn't, because this is a, no chart is just a 3-minute chart, right? It's like, in the grand scheme of things, this is not saying that Tesla is somehow like a super bullish play. It's really just saying that like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then an extended wave 5. And it's really just saying it's coming back up and retesting this, which is fine. And then the breakout on the widening only really has to go back to where the widening begins, which you could argue is either at 271 or 291 or right in between them. And that actually works very, very well here. It goes right to 281, which is right where you need to be. So this wrapped around it quite neatly. I'm not saying any reason to doubt that that's possible here. It certainly seems right. That doesn't mean you should YOLO in Tesla. I'm just telling you that it does look correct. Like, it looks like if there's a Friday squeeze, it will probably go as high as 277 there. And that does complete this widening. It does. Finishes this. This depends on where it starts. I don't know yet. And then later, that's where things get really spicy for Tesla, because probably after that it's not pleasant, because there's a weakness here as well. It's very similar to what we're experiencing in some regards presently. But that weakness, I think, follows through. And I had it marked off down here, but it may actually be a little bit more. It's just this pocket right here. It's at 200. So in preparation for May, I don't know how this happens, because it seems like that's a really big move down, but year one, year two kind of business. Or this is like a middle. Do this measure. Well, it's pretty close, guys. Yeah, it's pretty close. So this is not like mean it has to happen, but certainly like it's there for the taking. If this pumps up and then it immediately sells back off, I don't think you're going to be in the same spot. I think you probably do it in two spots, like normally would be like a double walk down. So let's take the measurement down from there. The timing of it is quite nice. That's what I'm trying to say. It does look it looks pretty close. So as close to even as you could expect it to be. I guess it's just a matter of opinion. It could be that it holds up and goes up again. But I actually think because of this, I think it's likely going to come back down. And I don't think you're going to have a huge amount of time here. That's gap 1 right there. It's not even that far-fetched. And then gap 2 is at 280, 228. It seems ridiculous, but it actually works quite well, because there's no this bothered me on this bottom. I said I didn't like it. There's something wrong with it. It didn't like go down and hit it. It like went across it and then just broke from it, which is highly unusual. Like, I don't find that to be a normal occurrence. I think this is like a spring. I know Musk is coming back, but I think this is like a spring action. I don't know what happens here that causes this sell down, but that actually is the correct wave, because this is the middle. Eek. You're like, no way. Yes way. I mean, they always get down there faster and then change direction, but that is where it is. Right here. It may even suggest it's like slightly above it, that gap right there. So like it could go down faster and like land here and never go super, super low, or just make a slightly less dramatic SOW, because I'm using a really dramatic one, but there could be one that's more relaxed that does something a little more chill, maybe stops here. Let's see if that makes any more sense. I mean, that makes a lot of sense if you look at where that middle is. It's right there. think it's actually on that top right here. I think that's where the middle is, right there. So if this ends up going as high as we think it could, and it breaks out and runs up here on a Friday or whatever, look out below shortly after. I mean, it's an insane move. It really is. Then again, this is an insane move. That's an insane move. It's not like this hasn't happened more than once here. This has had like 1, 2, 3 major sell downs. Later May. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think something off here. This is like an earnings pump, but I think it has like one major correction left in it. I mean, I'm being optimistic too, saying it comes up here. To be very fair, if this just rejected right now, I would not be that surprised to see it come back down here. It's just, this is like a big extension up. And these sell downs on some of these pumps are pretty massive, so it's not out of fear or something. It's really consistent with what's happened on this recently. Very consistent. GMEU. Yeah, so this would be a good time right here to trade the bottom one more time. If you want to get more technical, this is going to the 15th, and then maybe going out later into May. You come up. It works pretty well. Again, this is a little far off, but we'd have to see where the like the ears would generate like a new creek here. And it'd probably be similar to, and maybe this ends up not going down that low right away. Like, we don't know that it ever checks this. This could be a situation where it stays up here, doesn't really ever come down, and does like a spring later. So it creates like a double bottom or something, and then it has a little dip at the end. There's so many different ways to navigate the chart here, so, but that actually would be fine. And then come May, then you have more of a decision time. It just explodes. HNST. Yeah. We'll take a look. Yeah, I don't know. Tesla to me is more of a buy if it comes down, because I just feel like if it goes up first, I'm gonna be a bit like, oh, I don't know, like maybe it goes. It's not impossible. It just kind of holds and goes. I suppose there's like two places. One would be like the tip top, like a little localized breakout SOS. That might get me involved again in Tesla. So we could put an alert on Tesla at 5, maybe, 259.60, and then another alert slightly below 249.22. Those are both great entries. I mean, it may, you know how this is, like, I do this kind of stuff and then I end up coming back later and it like never hits it and I'm like frustrated at all get out because I missed it. So I mean, you can keep eyes on it. I'm just kind of eyeballing it and wondering. But this will be a great entry point on Thursday if we think Google beats and does well. Even if it doesn't, I think it's going to be a good opportunity. I'm trying to think about what else might be here. Like, why else come back down? Aside from that SOW. Don't know. And then we'll go look at the other chart that you asked for. Maybe this level. It does seem like this was quite important, whatever this is. I'm not sure where it is in the grand scheme of it. But it was used here as a support, so it may be worth testing it as a support. Because last time it failed to hold as a support, so we don't... Maybe that the market's trying to like get back to test that. And that is where it's pointing, so there's a moving average there as well. So there's a lot of things there. I wonder what's going to cause the market to squeeze if it squeezes tomorrow. Or if it just frankly does not squeeze tomorrow and it has a big hook, there's got to also be some kind of like catalyst event. Trump says Russia has offered to stop the war and stop taking the whole country. Deal with India would be a catalyst. I agree. He doesn't want the whole country. He just wants part of the country. I don't know if I buy that, but okay. He said that before, but he said that like a couple days ago, and then he said if they don't start coming to agreement, we're gonna walk away, and then he didn't walk away. So I was like, all right, you know, I don't know. I was watching the news on that. I was like, I don't get it. Yeah, I mean, it could just go here, I guess. I would actually rather see it. I know it sounds horrible. I want the good buy-in, of course, but like in some ways, this is better if it drops down and checks this. It gives you a much more, a better case for like a spring. I feel like if it goes up right now, this presents itself as like a dilemma of potentially there's a potential there, not a guarantee, but there's a potential there for like a distributive action at the top. So yeah, I don't know, man. The whole thing is kind of whatever. So I shouldn't say that. People have died. It's a very serious war. Obviously the idea of invading a country is very out of fashion, as it should be. Invading a country to get territory, like an empire. Ottoman Empire was the last empire. The British Empire still has territories, I guess. Yeah, let's take a look. I might take a Tesla trade. 280 seems high, but whatever. I'm going to give it a shot here. See what it costs. The thing about Tesla, you may not like it, but it moves very fast when it moves. So I don't think I go any farther than. It's not bad. Let's check a little bit lower, a little bit higher, and a little bit lower. Yeah, see, this is what I mean. Like, I don't know. This looks really overdone to me, but it could just be like one of those weaknesses that you see early and it doesn't really matter. That looks fine. Like, it's not even close to there yet on the 1 hour. That's kind of what I was thinking about. And then I want to go back down to like 6 minutes. It's not overbought. Not even on the 3 minute. I mean, you could get that way pretty fast if it pushes up here. But I'm thinking like, in terms of like a waterfall, it doesn't really seem to have a setup for it. I don't like this shape. I gotta be honest. But that's also on the 3 hour. So I'm thinking like that's gonna be a big like crap out. Like it's gonna pump up but then die as soon as it hits that top. Boom, all the way back down. So let's look at, so there's some for May that I like. They're like $2, May 2nd or whatever. Let's actually look at puts for Tesla. See if they're cheap right now. And let's go to here, but like farther out. Let's go to like May 16th or something. Actually, let's look at May 23rd. And let's look at 200. They're $3. That's not that bad. You can go a little lower, and when it starts dumping down, I bet they're going to go way up. I mean, like if it hits that top area, I'm going to be in puts. But I'm thinking ahead about volatility, and sometimes the volatility gets kind of crazy. So we'll see. And you could actually kind of initially lose money if you're not careful. What are you going to do, AMC? Maybe it just doesn't go down again. I don't know. I kind of suspected it wouldn't matter. It'd probably come up either way. So we'll see. And it did. It came up back to the top again. Yeah, I suspect it will do that regardless. All right. So I was going to look at another stock. Didn't look at it. Very curious to see what happens with Tesla and these puts, though. I might get into a small put position because I don't want to over leverage in AMC. If AMC goes at this point, if it goes by that week of May 16th or whatever, like I'm gonna make good money. But if it, if it doesn't go, then I'm going to be obviously adjusting everything for way out, but it's just one of those things I want to have some other plays in view. And I really think that Tesla is a good, I think it's a good play right here to get that other cat ear and then watch that drop. It's very classic distribution looking action to me. It may end up pushing farther than expected, but maybe it kind of props itself up into May too. That's possible. And then comes down after, like inverted. But either way, you could trade it from here backwards to 250. Even if it like props itself up, it might take another swing at 280. I'll have to come back and look at it when it gets up there. All right, and so I said I would look at The Honest Company. Is that Jessica Alba? Or is that the other celebrity company? I don't know. They all have companies. I don't know anybody that doesn't have a company. I'm sure some of them don't, but all right. Yeah, it's going. I mean, we suggested that it goes up to, if it breaks here, it goes up to the top here at 5. So I think we talked about maybe not playing it beyond 510. So instead of acting like higher, it acted lower, which is fine. A lot of times I just kind of default to one or the other, and you'll see me do it where I'm like, I think it's just going to stay low or go down again. But it left a pretty big liquidity gap here at 423 with that gap, but it is taking off. So, from here, I would say that, again, we're not like way off the ball here. We're just timing-wise having to change some things. I would say that this is very likely going to, it's very similar to the rest of the market, actually. In fact, it's so similar that I kind of wonder if it's very contrived. Where's the middle ear? Here. 1, and then this 1, 2, and then that's the bottom. And then there's 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, somewhere in there. 3, 4. So there should be a marker from the bottom of the cat ear. And there is. There's one right there. Right there. So that's the cross down. So it held support. The first support comes across. Last time it touches it is here. And then it drops away from it. That's one that you could use. That's usually very reliable. And then the other one would be this breakdown. There's usually another one because there's a lot of cat ears, or there's a lot of ears within ears kind of things. There's usually another one like right here during the second cat ear, and it usually has to do with where this breakdown is. So I'll use that one too. It looks like that. That's the one. Here it dropped, resisted, and then it dumped. So that's where we are now. So those are the main wave like targets. They already hit the first one. I'm not sure what to make of this long-term line. I mean, if it goes there, it feels like it's already kind of there. So I'm not sure. Like it's meaning like if it broke here, it just goes straight up. But this doesn't reach the others, so I'm kind of thinking about that in my head. And then this has a bizarre channel, so let's use it. I say it's bizarre because it created like two channels. There's one that's not nearly as dramatic, and it looks like it's coming to that motion. But you can tell there's an up thrust here. Or I say up thrust because I'm thinking about it in reverse, right? And I'm like, all right, if it came to the top and then reversed, could you have that push? I know it's kind of backwards, but could you have like let's say this came back down, could you then have a push up that kind of mirrors that motion here? Maybe. This goes back to like the middle, which this sort of already did, but let's say it went back to the middle again. That would be an adequate retest on that creek. Most of the time, this junk doesn't do what you want it to do when you think it's going to do it. It does it like later when it shouldn't be going backwards. Then it goes backwards and it's garbage. But that is probably where I would place it if it were going to make a retest. And it's a little on the nose, but then we can take this and measure it. And what I'm going to do is see where that ends up. It does end up here, 539, which is one of the targets that we have marked off because it's the middle. You see that? It's a cross, which means that this is a middle marker. Don't know exactly what it's a middle marker for, but I marked it off as a middle. And then this ends up triangulating to right here, which is where the creek cross has to be. So that also makes sense. But this is very similar to this other bottom here. So it's like, it almost doesn't matter except it just takes a detour. All right, so then there's a second, well, I said it's a wonky parallel structure because there's two. And then the second one is here, here. There. That's perfect. That's super clean. All right, so if it goes back down, does that mean it's weak? I think maybe in this case, it could be a bit of an early weakness that's going to indicate a later transition back low. I'm not just saying that because I already have it on the chart. Obviously, I had it on the chart, but it really does look like one of those things where if it goes up now or if it goes down now, it could be like a moderate weakness. I think the good news, and this is kind of like everything, right? We were looking at some stuff yesterday or today that looked like it could drop first, then go up. But, you know, if it goes up, it goes up. You could do the same kind of motion here on this break and just sort of chop for a minute. And then up like almost gapping up Monday. But it wouldn't surprise me too much if this ends up being down first. Just by the way it looks. And then breaks up and goes to there. That's a pretty simple to read wave too. So I would not trade this with an expectation that it gets there Monday. I'd probably add a few days in case that's a low pivot. Because if it ends up chopping until mid-week or even the week following, we look at it like May 5th or something. These guys are going to town on these trees. Right here. Yeah, I think the India trade deal would be a good one. Well, anyways, it may not go down that low either. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Point is that both cases give you kind of a similar target. It's in the right spot. Adjusting this to like meet it does look quite right back here on this top. Doesn't fit everywhere else, but Again, for fear that there could be like a pivot here, I would add like twice as many days to this, but it does look like the 28th of April. It's very likely going to get up there. I think we're still in like a market squeeze. We're going to squeeze through this range. And this does work, by the way, on the range level as well. If you look at that carefully, you can see why it might resist here and then fall and then bust through, go all the way through the range, or jump over and then hold there on that trend. So I think this is a pretty decent trade as well. It's got a good chance of going up to near 537. It's great for people that maybe want a cheaper trade for a swing and they're not willing to do options. This is an 18% move. If it hits 450 again, it's a big swing. If it just takes off right now, it's still like 12%. That's a nice trade. That's a good trade. It's an honest trade. You're like, dang it, Booksy. Why? It could do both. I mean, it could pop up here a little bit and then come back and then go up. I really can't tell. I mean, there's a lot of weirdness in the middle that would be difficult for me to judge. Yeah, I guess after that point, this depends on where this thing lands, if it's a SOW or not. I think you might have some sideways going into earnings. And maybe this is where it tries to make an advancement back over 563. I wouldn't put it past them. And this probably needed to be retested. So actually, it'd probably come back down. I think they would go for that instead. So if it ends up back down at like 490 or something earnings, it could definitely be kind of bullish. Something like this. I don't know. I don't think you can get back down there without... That's a steeper trend. Of course, with earnings, I guess you just never know. Could end up pushing high and then dumping backwards. And then that's like that's it. I mean, it was so simple, but it's easy enough to see it happening. So, hard to say. That's not high enough, so that would be a bigger... That's a big jump, though. I mean, and you do have to see this as like a giant move. I mean, it's already above it. So if it doesn't backtest right now, it's definitely going to come back down, in my opinion, and try at some point in the future. This is just an estimation based on the timing that we've seen so far. So anywho, I'm looking at maybe 5 to 540, and then probably wouldn't go further than that with this just yet. So I think you want to see it back up and see if it can find support. I think it's odd based on where it is, because that support doesn't really look like it's super important. It kind of looks like it's just dying, going back down through the level. But as long as it holds above that creek, it's got a possibility here that this is now forming like a new range. And then from that point, it's indefinite, undetermined, I should say, where it actually goes. It would be very sideways, could end up breaking down, breaking back out. Because all it would need to do here is push above that 540, and then it's technically turned. It's got the creek jump. If it doesn't push above that 530 area, it could still be very weak. And then this distribution could signal it's going to come all the way back down and make new lows. Very low, potentially. Because it has to make both the creek jump and the advancement. And so on the big picture, if it doesn't do that, then I don't think it's turned around. Yeah, I think we had looked at this in the past and said that reality is that this could come very, very low, down to $2 again, long term, because of the size of this wave. If this ends up distributing, it comes way back down. If this holds, then what could happen is that it dips back to this and creates a trend, which has not happened yet. That's kind of the more, I guess, a little more long term. That's kind of bullish. It's like selling off so soon, though. It really doesn't have to do it that way anyways. Could go sideways and hit over here. But anyways, so it would create some kind of bottom here. And then turn up. Turnips. Yeah, this is pretty normal though. I think we were expecting this regardless. So it's going to hit 276. I think I said that in the Discord. Watch 276 and 267 if it hits 276. I don't think you could say it's going yet because I believe this was setting up a little like a widening. Yep. So it's like a megaphone. Oh, I was about to break out the megaphone, Booksy. He's going to go. It's kind of early. But also, in terms of like the overall motion here, this is where you would likely have a distribution if it's going to distribute, because this is the previous top, 276, and that little gap down. So if there's some kind of a rug pull, don't panic. It probably comes back down to the lows, but I don't think that means it's bearish. I'm just saying. I really don't. There's another marker there I didn't draw. Just this one. Could stop that short. Anyways, yeah, I wouldn't panic. Cool as a cucumber. Because cucumbers are cool, I guess. Really, I mean, cucumbers are kind of cool to the touch on the surface, but is it just that, or is it like a texture thing, or is it because people were like grabbing refrigerated cucumbers? I don't know. Or did somebody just legitimately think they were like cool? Because cool wasn't really a big thing, I think, until like the 90s. Like a generational slang. Cool as a cucumber. They're cool to the touch. I wonder if it originally meant like you were dark. Like, you know, like cold. It wasn't actually like a positive thing. Ooh, she cool as a cucumber. I don't know why I said it like that. I don't know. All right. 1.5 million and 477 called for QQQ tomorrow. Well, that doesn't make me feel good. I don't like the idea of Friday being loaded. But again, maybe a Friday into Monday move would make sense. If it's green Friday, you usually do get a good move Monday. I don't know, man. I still think it could go either way. I know it's going up right now, but like because of where it's at, like I could definitely see a rug pull incoming right here, and all of them are the same. They're all kind of approaching these like levels where, yeah, that would make sense. You would have an up thrust before you drop down. So if the breakout's strong, it SOS's, you'll see the motion here, and it'll just go. But I would not at all, again, be surprised to see if this even pushed as high as it did and just kind of barely peaks here and then reverses hard and runs away from it going into the end of the day. So, all right, guys, I'm done. I got to go eat. I've had a long morning. I think I drove for like almost 3 hours in the rain, and I got to eat lunch and do some stuff. So this afternoon, businessy stuff. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. I should be on. I don't have any plans to not stream, but if the market's kind of flat or something silly, I probably won't do it. But if it's doing what we think it might do here and have a real big motion, I'm absolutely going to be here. So y'all have a good day, and I will talk to you later.